Hey everyone, and welcome to Nighttime Stories. I'm here to help you drift off into a peaceful sleep. Let me know where you're watching from. I always love seeing how far these stories reach. Now, get comfortable and relax. That Friday started like any other, the kind of day where I figured I would just kill a few hours babysitting, collect some easy cash, and maybe spend the next morning sleeping in. I did not question the phone call much. A coworker from my after-school job at the grocery store had mentioned her aunt needed someone last minute, and my number was passed along. Babysitting was the sort of thing I had done enough that I did not think twice. Kids were kids. I expected board games, cartoons, maybe some begging for cookies before bedtime. Nothing unusual. The address she gave me was on the edge of town, in one of those neighborhoods where the houses looked just a little too new, a little too perfect. Every lawn manicured, every driveway spotless, but no sign of actual people living there. No basketball hoops, no chalk drawings on the sidewalk. It felt more like a display in a catalog than a real neighborhood. I told myself it was just the kind of place where families cared about appearances. The house itself stood out. It was bigger than I thought it would be, with clean white siding and windows that reflected the gray evening light like mirrors. Even before I knocked, something about it made me pause. It had no welcome mat, no potted plants, no seasonal wreath on the door. Just blank, sterile perfection. The door opened almost instantly, like they had been waiting right on the other side. The couple that greeted me smiled too quickly, too wide. They looked like parents in a commercial, attractive but generic, dressed neatly but without any detail that would stick in your memory. Their voices carried that polite tone that felt practiced. They did not introduce themselves, which I thought was strange. No names, no handshake, not even a casual question about my experience. The man simply gestured toward the staircase and said, "She's upstairs. Do not let her stay up past 9. His wife repeated the same line a second later, with that exact same pause before the word 9. I laughed nervously and said, of course, expecting some extra instructions, like allergies or bedtime routines. Instead, they just stood there smiling at me until I excused myself and headed upstairs. Their smiles never dropped. The upstairs hallway smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, sharp and sterile. The carpet looked untouched, not a single mark from shoes. Every door was shut, but the one at the far end was cracked just slightly, and that is where I found her. She was sitting on her bed with a notebook in front of her, coloring with a red crayon. She did not look up when I entered, did not greet me, did not act like most kids who get excited when a babysitter shows up. I introduced myself and asked her name. She paused for a long moment, her crayon hovering over the paper, and then whispered, "I do not know yet." I tried to laugh, thinking maybe she was shy or playing a game. Her voice was so soft, though, it made my stomach tighten. Her room felt wrong in a way I could not pin down at first. Everything was too clean. The dresser drawers were empty when I peeked, the closet holding only a single dress, identical to the one she was wearing. The walls were bare, no posters, no school crafts taped up. Even the bed looked like it had been made for display rather than sleep, perfectly tucked corners and crisp sheets. I asked if she wanted me to read her a story before bed. That always worked with other kids. She turned her head slowly toward me, her face unreadable, and said, "That is not what they do." I asked what she meant, but she bent back over her drawing and said nothing else. As the evening dragged on, I tried to distract myself by watching television in the living room. The furniture looked brand new, stiff and uncomfortable. There were no remote controls on the coffee table, no magazines, no clutter of any kind. When I got up to get water from the kitchen, every cabinet I opened was empty. No plates, no cups, no food, just hollow shells of what a house was supposed to be. I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe they had just moved in and had not unpacked yet. That would explain the emptiness. Still, the silence pressed down heavier than any house I had ever been in. Even in the suburbs, you expect to hear a clock ticking, a fridge humming, Pipes creaking. Here, nothing. I checked on the girl around 8:30 and found her sitting in the same spot, staring at the corner of her room. The red crayon had rolled off the bed onto the carpet, but she had not moved to pick it up. Her little hands were folded neatly in her lap. When she finally glanced at me, her eyes were too wide, as if she had been startled awake. I asked if she was all right, and she just said, "It is almost time." That was the first moment I truly wanted to leave. But the thought of explaining that to the parents downstairs, parents who did not even tell me their names, froze me in place. I went back to the living room, sat on the stiff sofa, and watched the clock. The minutes crawled. I kept glancing at the empty kitchen doorway, at the darkened hallway, at the staircase that led up to that spotless room where the girl sat alone. At 8:55, I heard footsteps. Slow, measured, directly above me. The girl's room, then silence, then the sound of her bed creaking as if someone had sat down beside her. I forced myself to breathe, stood up, and took one step toward the stairs. The house groaned faintly, as if settling, but it sounded more like a breath. I stopped at the foot of the stairs, straining to hear, my whole body tensed. And then the silence returned, thick and unnatural. The clock on the wall ticked over to 9. The front door opened. The sound of the front door opening at exactly 9 stopped me cold. I had been staring at the clock as the minute hand hit the mark, willing myself to go upstairs, to check on the girl, to make sure she was not sitting with whoever or whatever had made her bed creak. But the door opening froze me in place. I expected to hear the parents calling out, maybe apologizing for being late, maybe asking how everything had gone. Instead, I heard nothing, just the faint shuffle of footsteps, slow and even, like the rhythm of a metronome. I stood in the living room, clutching the strap of my bag like a lifeline, listening as the steps moved through the hallway and toward the stairs. My throat went dry. Something about the sound of those steps was wrong, too steady, too rehearsed. When they finally came into view, I felt the breath leave me. The parents stood side by side in the hallway, smiling that same stretched smile they had greeted me with earlier. But they looked different now. Their clothes had changed. The father wore a pressed shirt I had not seen before, the fabric still damp, clinging to his skin. The mother's hair was wet, drops of water darkening the shoulders of her blouse. It was as if they had taken showers somewhere and dressed in fresh clothes before stepping back into their own house. They spoke in unison, their voices flat and mechanical. Did she behave? My heart hammered. I nodded quickly, unable to find words. Their smiles widened, almost splitting their faces. The mother stepped forward and pressed a folded bill into my palm, her skin cold against mine. Then, without another word, she turned and climbed the stairs. The father did not move. He just stared at me, unblinking, his expression frozen in that too-wide grin. I stammered something like, "Thank you," and hurried toward the door, but his eyes followed me the entire way, not turning his head, not blinking, just tracking me until I slipped outside. The night air hit me like a slap. I half expected to see the house vanish behind me as soon as I stepped onto the driveway, but when I glanced back, it was still there, glowing faintly under the streetlight. I drove away faster than I should have, not daring to check the rearview mirror until I was several streets over. When I finally looked, my stomach lurched. The back seat of my car was dark, empty, but for a split second I thought I saw a pale face reflected in the window glass. By the time I blinked, it was gone. I did not sleep much that night. My mind spun in circles, replaying every detail. The girl's whisper, the empty drawers, the parents' wet clothes, the unison voices. None of it fit together. It felt staged, but for what? The next morning, I tried to convince myself it had just been an odd family. People are strange. Some parents have weird routines. Maybe they really had been out swimming or something before coming home. Maybe the girl was shy and imaginative. But the explanations did not stick. They slid right off the memory of those blank eyes and that brittle smile. At work that afternoon, I mentioned the babysitting job to my coworker, more to reassure myself it had been real. I said something like, "Hey, thanks for passing my number to your aunt. That house was huge." She frowned. "My aunt? What are you talking about?" I laughed awkwardly, waiting for her to remember, but she just shook her head. "I do not have an aunt around here. I never passed your number to anyone." The pit in my stomach opened wide. I pushed, asking if maybe someone else in her family had called, but she was adamant. She had no idea what I was talking about. That evening, unable to shake the unease, I drove past the address again. I wanted proof, something concrete to tether the memory to reality. What I found made my skin crawl. The house looked abandoned. The yard was overgrown with weeds, the paint on the siding peeling, the windows cracked and dark. A "for sale" sign leaned crooked in the front yard, its edges weathered. It looked like no one had lived there in years. But I had been inside the night before. I had walked on its spotless carpet, opened its empty drawers, spoken to its child. I pulled over and sat there with the engine running, staring at the house until my hands shook on the steering wheel. My brain fought itself, one part screaming that I had imagined it, the other replaying the sound of the girl whispering, "It is almost time." When I finally drove away, I noticed something crumpled on the passenger seat. My stomach turned when I recognized the folded bill the mother had pressed into my hand. I had left it on my desk at home that morning. Somehow, it was back in the car with me. I forced myself to unfold it. At first, in the dim light of the street lamp outside, I thought it was a normal 20, but the paper felt brittle, the color faded. In the daylight, I would see the truth, but even then, I noticed the date stamped faintly on it, 1974. And worse, across the bill, scrawled in shaky pen, were the words, "Do not let her stay up past 9. I dropped it onto the seat and gripped the wheel tighter, fighting the urge to scream. That night, I barely moved from my bed, too afraid to check the windows, too afraid to turn off the light. Every creak of the house sent a jolt through me. My phone buzzed around midnight, an unknown number lighting up the screen. I did not answer, but the message came through anyway, just one sentence, written plainly. "We need you again this Friday, same time." My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I stared at the words until they blurred, until the glow of the screen burned into my eyes. I thought about blocking the number, about throwing the phone across the room, but deep down I knew it would not matter. They had found me once. They could find me again. And as I lay there, listening to the silence press down around me, I realized the part that scared me most was not the house, or the girl, or even the parents' brittle smiles. It was that some part of me, buried deep and irrational, already knew I would go back. I carried that message around in my head all week like a splinter I could not dig out. Every time my phone buzzed, I half expected another text, some new instruction, some reminder. None came, just the single line, "We need you again this Friday, same time." I told myself I would ignore it, that it was a prank, that it had to be. But no matter how many times I tried to reason it away, the memory of that girl whispering in her spotless room, the way her parents' smiles seemed stretched thin over something else. The brittle bill from 1974. None of it let me go. Friday arrived faster than I thought it would. I spent the day in a haze, distracted, making mistakes at work. My coworker asked if I was feeling all right, and I almost told her everything, but the words caught in my throat. I already knew what she would say. She would deny it again, swear she had never given my number to anyone. That evening, as the sun slipped down, I found myself in the car, driving toward the edge of town without consciously deciding to. It was like something inside me had already chosen, and I was just catching up. The neighborhood was darker this time, more lifeless. The houses sat in neat rows, but none of them had lights on. No cars in the driveways, no porch lamps, no movement behind the windows. The whole place felt staged again, but emptier now, like a movie set after the crew had left. When I turned onto the street where the house stood, my chest tightened. Last time it had looked lived in, spotless and sterile but real enough. Now it looked like it had when I drove past the second time, abandoned. The yard overgrown, the siding cracked, the windows dark and broken. A for sale sign leaned against the porch, bent and rusting. I should have turned around. Every instinct screamed at me to keep driving, to go home, to lock my own doors and never answer unknown numbers again. But I parked at the curb. I got out. My feet crunched on the gravel as though pulled by something heavier than choice. The front door hung crooked on its hinges. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The air hit me first. Cold, damp, carrying the smell of mildew and rot. The interior did not match what I had seen before. No spotless carpet, no polished furniture. Instead, the living room was empty, the floorboards warped and broken, cobwebs hung thick in the corners. I told myself I was losing it, that my memory had filled in details that were never there. But then I looked down at the floor. In the dust and grime, faint footprints led across the room toward the stairs. Small footprints, too small to be an adult's. I followed them, each step heavier than the last. The upstairs hallway was darker, the air even colder. The doors hung open now, but only one room seemed to have shape. The last door on the left. Her room. The footprints led directly inside. When I stepped through the doorway, my stomach turned. The room was exactly as I had seen it before. Spotless. Bed neatly made. Dresser drawers empty. Closet holding one dress. Even the faint smell of lemon cleaner lingered. And there she was, sitting on the bed, coloring with that same red crayon. She looked up at me this time, her eyes too wide, too dark, like they were absorbing the light instead of reflecting it. "You came back," she whispered. I tried to speak, but my mouth was dry. Finally I managed. "What is your name?" She tilted her head, just slightly. "I still do not know yet." The crayon rolled from her hand and dropped soundlessly to the floor. She folded her hands in her lap and stared at the corner of the room, just as she had before. "They are early again," she said softly. A chill crawled down my spine. I glanced at the window and saw it. A pale face pressed against the glass, grinning, the skin stretched tight over sharp cheekbones. We were on the second floor. No ladder, no balcony, nothing but empty air beneath that window. I stumbled back, but when I blinked, the face was gone. The girl's eyes followed something invisible across the room. She nodded faintly, as though acknowledging someone I could not see. Then she whispered, "You should go before they decide." My legs moved before my brain did. I bolted from the room, down the stairs and out the door. The night air was thick with the smell of damp earth, of mildew and rot, of something old. My car sat exactly where I had left it, but the windows were fogged from the inside. I pulled the door open and froze. On the passenger seat lay another folded bill. My hands shook as I picked it up. It was brittle, yellowed with age. This time, it was a 5, dated 1969. The same shaky handwriting scrawled across it. "Do not let her stay up past 9. I threw it onto the floor of the car and slammed the door shut. My hands gripped the wheel so tight they ached, but I could not bring myself to start the engine. Then my phone buzzed again. The same unknown number. The message read, "Thank you. She behaved tonight." My heart sank. My mind spun with questions I could not let form fully. Behaved for who? For what? The neighborhood behind me looked darker now, as if the streetlights themselves had gone out. My reflection in the windshield was pale and shaking. Finally, I started the engine and drove away, refusing to look back. But the entire drive home, I swore I could see movement in the corner of my rearview mirror. A pale face, grinning, watching, waiting. When I got home, I locked the doors, pulled the curtains tight, and shoved the bills into the back of my desk drawer. I tried to sleep, but every creak of the house, every car passing outside, every shadow shifting on the wall jolted me awake again. Around 3 in the morning, I gave up and sat in the dark with my phone in my hands, waiting. Another message came, just 3 words: "We will call." I told myself I would not answer if they called, that I would block the number, burn the bills, and never drive near that neighborhood again. But the more I tried to resist, the stronger the pull became. It was like gravity, drawing me back to that hollow house and the girl who whispered that she did not know her own name. The days blurred together. At work, I jumped whenever the phone rang. At home, I kept my curtains closed tight, though I often caught myself staring at the thin slits of light, waiting for a pale face to appear outside. The bills sat in the drawer of my desk, but I could not bring myself to throw them away. I would check them at night, unfolding the brittle paper, tracing the shaky handwriting with my finger. The words never changed. "Do not let her stay up past 9. By Thursday, I had convinced myself I was imagining it all. Sleep deprivation, stress, a prank that had wormed its way too deep into my mind. Then Friday came. The call arrived just after sunset. Not a text this time, but an actual call. The same unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. The voice on the other end was flat, genderless, strangely distorted, as if 2 people were speaking at once. "We need you again, same time." My throat went dry. I managed to whisper, "No." Silence stretched on the line for several seconds, too long, like they were deciding how to respond. Then the voice said, "It is not a choice." The line went dead. I sat frozen with the phone pressed to my ear, the words echoing in my head. It is not a choice. That night, I did not drive to the house. I locked every door, pushed furniture against the windows, and sat on my bed with a kitchen knife clutched in my hand. My dog whined at the door, restless, unsettled. At exactly 9, the knocking started. Not at my front door, not at the windows, but from inside the walls. 3 deliberate knocks, muffled through plaster and wood. I pressed my back against the headboard, heart racing, knife trembling in my grip. The knocking moved, slow and steady, from one wall to another, circling me, always in sets of 3, always patient. I covered my ears and squeezed my eyes shut. When I opened them again, my phone buzzed. A new message. "She is awake. You were supposed to help." My stomach twisted. The knife slipped from my hands. The knocking stopped. Silence filled the house again, heavier than before. The next morning, I drove past the address again. I told myself I would see the same abandoned shell of a house, broken windows and peeling paint. But when I turned the corner, my breath caught. The house was whole again, spotless siding, perfectly trimmed grass, curtains drawn neatly across each glowing window, as if the decay had been nothing more than a dream. My car idled at the curb. I stared at the front door, at the clean white paint, waiting. The door opened slowly. The mother stood there, smiling too wide, her hair dry and neat this time. She raised her hand in a small wave, as if she had known I would come. I slammed the car into gear and sped away, refusing to look back. But later that evening, I found something tucked under my windshield wiper. Another bill, this one a 10, dated 1981. The words scrawled across it, "Do not let her stay up past 9. I could not breathe. I shoved the bill into my pocket and went inside, locking the door behind me. I paced the living room until my legs ached. Finally, I called my coworker. I had avoided telling her the full truth, afraid she would think I had lost it, but I could not hold it in anymore. I told her everything. The calls, the bills, the girl, the parents, the house that shifted between lived in and abandoned. She listened quietly, then said something that chilled me. "You know, there used to be a family that lived on that street. My mom told me about it once, said they were strange, kept to themselves. People whispered about them. Then one night, they all just vanished. No one ever figured out where they went." I asked when that was. She hesitated before answering. "Sometime in the 70s, I think." The bills. 1974, 1969. each one older than I was, each one carrying the same message. I asked her if she knew their name, but she said she did not remember, just that people said they were not right. That night, I dreamed of the girl. She sat on her bed with her red crayon, staring at me with wide, dark eyes. Only this time, she spoke clearly. "You belong to them now. You cannot stop it." I woke with sweat soaking my sheets, my chest tight, my throat dry. When I reached for my phone, there was a new message waiting. "You are late." The house sat in my mind like a weight. The girl's whisper, the pale face at the window, the parents' brittle smiles. I knew I should run, leave town, forget it all. But deep down, I felt it. I was already bound. The next evening, I found another folded bill slipped under my apartment door, a 20 this time. Not brittle like the others, but fresh and crisp. It had today's date written across it in the same shaky handwriting. "Do not let her stay up past 9. My hands shook as I unfolded it. My heart pounded. The room felt colder, the shadows darker. The message had changed. Now it was not just a warning. It was a command. I carried the fresh 20 around all day, unable to throw it away. The old brittle bills were easy enough to hide in a drawer, to pretend they were just relics from someone else's life. But this one was different. This one was new, warm from the printer, crisp under my fingers, with today's date scrawled across it in that same unsteady hand. Every time I looked at it, my stomach tightened. Whoever or whatever had left it knew where I lived. They had slipped it under my door without a sound. The thought made my skin crawl. I imagined pale faces pressed against the glass of my windows while I slept, hands sliding envelopes through cracks, waiting just out of sight. That night, I dreamed of the girl again. She was sitting on her bed, her red crayon worn down to a stub, the pages in front of her filled with jagged circles. She looked up at me, her wide, dark eyes unblinking, and whispered, "They will not wait much longer. You have to decide." I woke gasping, the 20 clutched in my hand. I could not even remember picking it up. Saturday morning, I drove out to the edge of town again. I told myself I was just curious, that I needed to see the house in daylight to prove to myself it was abandoned, rotting, nothing more than a husk. But when I turned onto the street, my heart sank. The house was perfect again. White siding gleaming, grass trimmed, curtains drawn. A car sat in the driveway this time, an old sedan that looked polished to a shine. The front door stood slightly open, as though inviting me in. I parked a block away, hands gripping the wheel. I told myself not to go closer, that I was done with this, but my body betrayed me. Step by step, I moved toward the house, up the cracked sidewalk that looked freshly scrubbed, onto the porch that no longer sagged under its own weight. Inside, the air smelled of lemon cleaner again. The furniture was in place. The cabinets, when I opened them, were still empty, but not broken anymore. It was like stepping into a stage set that someone had carefully reconstructed just for me. I heard movement upstairs. Light footsteps. Too light to be the parents. The girl. I found her in her room, exactly where she had been before, sitting on the bed with her notebook and her red crayon. She did not look up as I entered. Her hand moved in small, deliberate strokes across the page. I forced myself to ask, "What are you drawing?" She paused, then slowly turned the notebook toward me. My stomach flipped. The page was filled with shaky outlines of faces, wide grins, hollow eyes. Dozens of them crammed onto the paper until they bled into one another. She whispered, "They want you to stay." The words chilled me more than the drawing. I stepped back, shaking my head. "I am not staying here." Her lips twitched as if she wanted to smile, but it never formed. "You already are." The door creaked behind me. I spun, but no one was there. Just the hallway, dark and still. When I turned back, the notebook was gone, and the girl was staring at the corner of the room again. "They are here," she whispered. The window glass shifted, and for a moment I saw them. Pale faces pressed against the pane, grinning, too many to count. Their eyes were blank voids, and their teeth were long and sharp. They did not move, just watched, waiting. I stumbled out of the room, down the stairs, and through the front door. The air outside felt no safer, heavier with the sense of being observed. I could feel them behind every window as I hurried down the street. When I got home, another message was waiting on my phone. Friday again. Do not be late. I deleted it without replying, but it did not matter. The next day, a bill appeared on my kitchen counter, though I had not left the door unlocked. A 50 this time, dated 1989. The handwriting across it read, "She must not stay up past 9. I shoved it into the drawer with the others, but my hands shook. The pile was growing, each bill older, more fragile, except for the new ones, which always bore the date of the day they appeared. I tried to research the family, digging through old newspapers at the library. What I found only deepened my unease. There had been reports of a missing family in that neighborhood in the 1970s, but the articles were vague. One mentioned 2 children, but only described one in detail. A girl, around 8 years old, with dark eyes and light hair. No name was listed. No resolution was ever found. One article contained a single disturbing line. Neighbors recall strange routines, the family repeating the same sentences, as if rehearsed. The words echoed in my head. Did she behave? The librarian glanced at me strangely as I photocopied the article. She asked why I was so interested in that old case. I lied and said it was for a school project. Her eyes lingered on me for a moment too long before she nodded. That night, I set the photocopy on my desk beside the stack of bills. I stared at them until the words blurred. My phone buzzed again around 9. Another message. She is waiting. I turned the phone off and shoved it under a pillow. But the knock started again, this time from the ceiling. 3 deliberate raps, spaced evenly, then silence, then again, closer. I did not sleep. When morning came, I checked my desk. The photocopy was gone. In its place was another bill, this one a 1, dated 1963. The handwriting was the same. Do not let her stay up past 9. My hands shook as I held it. They were closing in. They knew everything I touched, everything I tried to uncover. And I realized then that I had no choice. They were not asking anymore. They were telling. Friday was coming, and they would not let me ignore it. Friday arrived like a storm cloud I could not avoid. Every hour dragged, each one heavier than the last, and by evening my nerves were frayed to nothing. I told myself 100 times that I would not go, that I would lock myself inside and let them rage against the walls if they wanted. But as the sun set, I found myself standing by the door with my keys in my hand, the weight of the bills pressing on me from the drawer where I had hidden them. It was not choice anymore. It never had been. The drive out to the edge of town felt like moving through a dream, every street empty, every light too dim. When I reached the neighborhood, my stomach clenched. The house was glowing with warm light, curtains drawn, grass trimmed, as if nothing had ever been wrong with it. The old sedan sat in the driveway again, gleaming under the street lamp. The front door was already ajar. I stepped inside. The smell of lemon cleaner hit me instantly, sharp and sterile. The furniture was arranged exactly as before, everything perfect and spotless. The air hummed with stillness, as if the house itself was holding its breath. The parents appeared in the hallway, smiling with those stretched faces. They spoke in unison, their voices flat and rehearsed. She is upstairs. Do not let her stay up past 9. I opened my mouth to protest, to say I was done, but no sound came. My throat felt locked. The mother pressed another bill into my palm. My fingers closed around it on their own. I climbed the stairs. Her room was waiting, spotless, bed perfectly made, closet holding one dress, dresser empty, and there she was, sitting on the bed with her notebook and the red crayon, as if not a single second had passed since I first met her. She looked up at me this time, her wide eyes steady. "You came back," she said. I forced myself to whisper, "Who are you?" She tilted her head. "I do not know yet." Then, after a pause, she added, "But I know you." The red crayon dropped from her fingers and rolled across the carpet. She folded her hands in her lap and stared at the corner of the room. "They are here." The window glass shimmered. Faces pressed against it again, pale and grinning, teeth sharp, eyes blank. Too many to count. My chest tightened as I backed toward the door, but her voice stopped me. "If I stay up past 9, they come inside," she whispered. The clock on her wall ticked toward 9. I felt it like a drumbeat in my chest. "What happens if they come inside?" I asked, my voice shaking. She finally looked at me directly. "Then it is not me anymore." I froze, watching her small hands clench together, her body trembling like she was fighting something unseen. The air grew colder, the light dimmed. The house groaned, a sound like breath moving through its walls. The clock struck 9. The door slammed behind me. The girl's eyes widened, her lips parting in a silent cry. She began to change. Her face stretched, her eyes darkened, her body contorted as if something was trying to push through her skin. The pale faces at the window pressed closer, their grins wider. I ran forward without thinking, grabbing her small shoulders, shaking her. "Stay awake. Do not let them in." Her mouth opened and a sound came out, not a scream, but a chorus of voices, layered and echoing, too many to belong to one child. My ears rang, my vision swam, but I held on. The parents' voices rose from the hallway, speaking in perfect unison. She must not stay up past 9. The girl's body jolted, then went limp in my arms. The voices cut off. The house went silent. The faces at the window melted away into the dark. I laid her gently back on the bed. Her chest rose and fell in slow, steady breaths. Her eyes fluttered open, softer now, human again. "You kept me," she whispered. I stumbled back, my heart hammering. The parents appeared in the doorway, their smiles stretched but steadier now. The father spoke first, his voice strangely calm. "You did well." The mother nodded, pressing her hands together. "She behaved." I shook my head, my voice finally breaking free. "What is she? What are you?" They looked at one another, their smiles never fading. "We are what is left," the father said. The mother added, "And now, so are you." Before I could speak again, the girl's voice cut through the air. "You should go." I backed out of the room, down the stairs and out the front door. The night air hit me, cool and damp, but I could still hear her whisper in my head, "You should go." When I reached my car, another bill was waiting on the driver's seat. I picked it up with shaking hands. 100, crisp and fresh. Across it, in the same shaky handwriting, were the words, "You did well." I drove home in silence, the bill heavy in my pocket. That night, for the first time in weeks, there was no knocking, no messages, no pale faces at my windows. The house was quiet, but I knew it was not over. The bills still sat in my drawer, brittle with age. The girl's wide eyes lingered in my mind. The parents rehearsed smiles, their voices in unison. All of it stayed with me, and though the silence of my own apartment felt safe, I could not shake the truth. They had given me a role. I had played it, and now I belonged to them, whether I wanted to or not. When I checked my phone the next morning, there was no new message, just the old ones, sitting there like scars. But at the bottom of the screen, one new notification blinked, a calendar invite. It read, "Friday, same time." I stared at it until my vision blurred, the weight of it sinking into me. This was not an ending. It was a routine, a script I had stepped into, one I could never step out of. Still, for the first time, I understood. I was not their babysitter. I was theirs. It was late, but not so late that I should have felt nervous about being awake. I was sitting on my bed with the light from my desk lamp spilling across my notes, half pretending I was going to keep studying, half scrolling on my phone instead. The house was quiet. My sister had gone to bed earlier after complaining about my music being too loud. and my mom was asleep down the hall. The only sound was the faint hum of the heater, nothing unusual at all. Then my phone buzzed with that tone, the one that cuts straight into your chest, the emergency alert. I flinched so hard I almost dropped it. The screen glowed bright red. I expected to see something about a storm or maybe an amber alert. Instead, I froze at the words, "Emergency alert. Avoid the shadows. They are not yours. Remain in well-lit areas until further notice." I stared at it for a long moment, waiting for the punchline. It had to be some kind of prank, right? Hackers messing with the system. But the words didn't vanish. They stayed there, pulsing in red, official-looking, impossible to laugh off once I kept reading them. I laughed anyway, that shaky kind of laugh you do when you are uncomfortable. I muttered out loud, "Sure, okay, shadows are dangerous now," like saying it would make it less unsettling. I set the phone down on my bed and ran my hand across my face. My chest felt tight for no reason I could explain. I glanced toward the wall where the lamp behind me threw a long shadow of my head and shoulders. That was when I noticed it. The shadow did not line up right. It was just a fraction of a beat off from my movements. I lifted my hand, just a quick wave, and my shadow raised its hand too, but slower. Not much, but enough to make me freeze. I waited until my hand was back down at my side, and then I looked again. The shadow twitched its fingers after mine had already gone still. I sat there not breathing, my eyes wide, trying to find some reason for it. The lamp was flickering maybe. A bulb about to burn out. I leaned closer, checking the bulb, but the light was steady, no buzzing, no flashes. I backed away and tried again. I lifted both arms slowly. The shadow followed, but not perfectly. A half-second behind, like a bad connection in a video call. The laugh that slipped out this time had no humor in it. I grabbed my phone off the bed and stared at the alert again. The red glow lit my hand, the letters still demanding that I stay in the light. I checked the time, 11:06 at night. That was what the alert had stamped at the top. I tried to remember if I had ever seen something like this before, if maybe I was tired enough to misread it. But no, the words were still there, impossible to mistake. Avoid the shadows. My stomach twisted as I turned to the mirror on the closet door. My reflection stared back, the same tired face, the same messy hair. But the reflection's shadow, the darker patch behind me, was bent just slightly out of line. It tilted its head at the wrong angle, like it was studying me instead of copying me. I grabbed the lamp and dragged it closer to me, flooding the corner of the room with more light. The shadow smoothed out, falling back into place for a second. I thought I had fixed it. But then my reflection's shadow twitched again. Its head jerked, and I dropped the lamp back onto the desk with a clatter. I could not sit there anymore. I stepped into the hallway, clutching my phone. The glow from the kitchen nightlight barely reached the stairs. I moved quickly, each footstep sounding too loud. I kept glancing at the walls, at the floor, anywhere my shadow might fall. I did not want to look, but I also could not stop myself. My body felt pulled between the two choices. In the kitchen, I found my sister standing by the table with her arms crossed. She looked pale, her hair sticking out on one side from sleep. She held her phone in one hand, the screen glowing the same red. Before I could say anything, she said in a shaky voice, "Mine's not right either." She tilted her head slightly toward the wall. Her shadow lagged behind the movement, slower, jerky. My throat closed. I told her maybe it was a trick of the light, maybe a reflection from outside, maybe anything that made sense. She cut me off with a whisper, "Yours just smiled at me." The words made my skin crawl. I snapped my head toward the wall, my chest tight, but my shadow stood flat and still like it always had. I wanted to believe her eyes were playing tricks, but the memory of mine twitching earlier refused to fade. I pulled her closer to the kitchen light and told her to stay under it, no matter what. She nodded fast, gripping my sleeve. That was when the neighborhood outside erupted. A noise rolled through the street, not one sound but many at once. Doors opening, voices rising in confusion. I moved to the window and pulled the curtain aside just a crack. The houses across the street were lit up, porch lights flicking on one by one. People stood on their lawns, some in pajamas, some barefoot, all staring downward. Their shadows stretched across the pavement, but not right. Some bent sideways when their owners stood still. Others flickered in and out like bad projections. One man turned in a circle, and his shadow spun the opposite direction. The streetlights overhead buzzed, a harsh electric hum, and then the lights on half the block flickered. For a split second, the houses at the far end of the street were plunged into blackness. A scream ripped through the night, then another, then more, layered over each other. When the lights flickered back on, the street was emptier. People stood frozen in shock, staring at the houses where the lights had gone out. I dropped the curtain back and staggered away from the window. My sister's hand tightened on my arm. Her voice trembled when she whispered, "What's happening?" I had no answer. I could not tell her the truth, that I had no idea what was wrong, only that something was. The alert had said to avoid the shadows. But how do you avoid something that follows you everywhere? Something that knows your shape better than you do? I pulled every lamp I could find into the kitchen. My sister helped, her hands shaking, both of us avoiding looking too closely at the walls. The light grew harsh, pooling in every corner, chasing away as much darkness as possible. But even there, under all that brightness, I kept noticing the way the shadows clung just a little too long to the edges of the room. My phone buzzed again, the sound sharp in the silence. A new alert filled the screen. The same red glow, the same blunt words, only repeated in all caps this time, urgent enough to sting my eyes. "Do not engage. Remain in light. They are not yours." I showed it to my sister, and she squeezed my arm tighter. We did not speak. There was nothing left to say. All we could do was stay in the light and pray the bulbs would not flicker the way the streetlights had. I sat down at the table, my heart hammering, my sister beside me with her flashlight clutched tight. The house groaned in the quiet. I stared at the shadows on the wall and tried not to notice that they still seemed just a half beat behind. The house felt too bright and too fragile all at once. We had dragged every lamp we owned into the kitchen, but the light only reached so far. Every corner that slipped a little darker felt alive, like something was crouched just out of sight, waiting for a bulb to burn out. My sister sat across from me with her flashlight gripped in both hands, the beam pointed at the ceiling. Her knuckles were white, and her breathing was shallow, like she was afraid to make any sound at all. The glow from the lamps pushed our shadows hard against the walls, stretching them wide, making them look distorted even before anything unnatural touched them. I kept trying not to look, but my eyes betrayed me every few seconds, checking, waiting for one of them to twitch. The street outside was not quiet anymore. I could hear footsteps pounding across driveways, people shouting to each other, a car door slamming, tires screeching against the pavement. It sounded like the whole neighborhood was awake, and nobody knew what to do. The screams from earlier still clung to the air. My stomach twisted thinking about them, about the way the streetlights had flickered out and then snapped back on with fewer people standing there. I wanted to believe maybe they had just run back inside, but the sound of those screams did not leave room for that kind of comfort. I stood and went to the sink, not because I was thirsty, but because I needed to move. The kitchen window was dark, the glass reflecting only the bright glow of the lamps behind me. For a moment I thought I was safe from seeing outside. Then I noticed the reflection was wrong. My sister sat at the table behind me, but in the reflection her shadow stretched farther across the wall than it should have, bending in a way that her body did not. I blinked hard, rubbed at my eyes, and when I looked again, it was back where it belonged. I told myself I was just tired. My sister broke the silence with a whisper. "Do you think it's everywhere, or just here?" I did not want to answer, but she kept staring at me, waiting. "If it's on the alerts, then it's probably bigger than here. They don't send out messages like that for just one neighborhood." Her eyes widened. "Then what are we supposed to do? We can't stay awake forever." I sat back down heavily. "We stay in the light. That's all the alert said. That's what we do, for now." The words felt hollow, like I was repeating them for myself more than for her. She nodded anyway and clutched the flashlight tighter. The kitchen clock ticked on the wall louder than I had ever noticed before. Each second sounded like it might be the last one before the lights failed. Then it happened. The overhead lamp flickered once, just a quick hiccup, but enough to send both of us scrambling to our feet. My sister cried out, the beam of her flashlight jerking across the room. The shadows on the wall seemed to leap in that moment, like they had been waiting. I grabbed the flashlight from the counter and snapped it on, pointing it into the nearest corner. The light filled the space, and the shadows smoothed back down, too quick, too obedient. My chest ached from holding my breath. A knock rattled the front door. We both froze. The sound came again, slower, deliberate. I glanced toward the hall, and then back at my sister. Her lips moved soundlessly, forming the word, no. The knock came a third time, followed by a voice. It was our neighbor, Mr. Larkin. I recognized it immediately. It's me. Open the door. Something's wrong with my house. Please. I felt myself take a step before my brain caught up. My sister grabbed my arm and shook her head furiously. Her eyes were wide with panic. Don't, she whispered. I hesitated, then called back. Stay in the light. That's what they said. Silence followed for a moment. Then the voice came again, but it was off, stretched, like it was being dragged over broken glass. Open the door, please. The lights flickered again just for a second, and my heart stopped. My sister's flashlight beam swung wildly, catching the hallway wall. For a split second I saw both of our shadows moving, except mine was smiling. Its mouth stretched too wide, the grin sharp and wrong, before the light steadied again and it snapped back to normal. My sister saw it too. She screamed, stumbling backward into the counter, the flashlight clattering from her hands. I lunged forward, snatching it up, flooding the room with more light. Her shadow twitched again on the wall, its arm lifting slowly while hers stayed at her side. I shined both beams straight at it, forcing it back into place, but my stomach was churning so violently I thought I might throw up. From the front door came another sound, not a knock this time but a scraping, like fingernails dragging down the wood. My sister pressed both hands over her ears and shook her head, her eyes squeezed shut. I held the flashlight steady, aiming at every corner, every stretch of wall where the shadows tried to slide out of sync. My arms trembled from the effort. After a few minutes, the scraping stopped. The house went silent except for the tick of the clock and our ragged breathing. I lowered one flashlight slightly, and my sister hissed at me to keep it up. I forced myself to smile at her, but my lips shook too much for it to mean anything. The power in the neighborhood surged again. I could hear the transformers buzzing outside, followed by the faint pop of another light blowing out down the street. More screams carried through the night, thin and distant, like they were being pulled into the dark. My stomach clenched at the thought of what was happening out there, what had already happened to Mr. Larkin and anyone else who had stepped out of the light. I told my sister we had to make a plan. Sitting still would not save us forever. Batteries would die, bulbs would burn out, and then we would be left in the dark, with whatever was watching from the walls. She nodded, wiping tears from her cheeks, but her hands shook so badly she could barely keep hold of the flashlight. I gathered candles from the drawer and lined them across the counter, lighting each one carefully. The flames danced, small but steady, casting warm light that pushed the shadows back just a little more. I felt calmer seeing them, though I could not shake the thought of what would happen if one by one they burned low. My sister whispered that she hated candles, hated how they flickered, but she did not argue. She just stayed close, her eyes darting from wall to wall. Time crawled. Every creak of the house made us jump. The shadows clung close, patient, bending just a little too far when we moved. I kept checking the phone on the table, hoping for another alert, something to tell us what to do next. But the screen stayed black, no new message, only the last one repeating in my mind. They are not yours. Around midnight, I thought I heard a laugh outside. Faint, high-pitched, not like any neighbor I knew. My skin crawled, and I turned every lamp brighter, candles trembling as I leaned too close. My sister whispered that she wanted Dad, that he would know what to do. I had no answer. All I could do was keep the lights burning and hope the night would not swallow us before morning came. The candles burned unevenly, dripping wax down their sides, making little rivers that hardened along the counter. Their flicker made the walls shift, and every time the shadows stretched or pulled too far, my chest tightened. My sister kept pacing the kitchen, her flashlight beam jerking across the ceiling, her breathing too quick. I told her to sit down, to try to rest, but she just shook her head. Her eyes were wide and glassy, darting to every corner. I could not blame her. The moment you stopped looking, you felt the shadows leaning in. From outside came another wave of noise. This time it was a man's voice yelling, sharp and angry, followed by a woman screaming his name. I recognized them, our next-door neighbors, the Larkins. The sound carried through the thin walls as clearly as if it were in the same room. My sister froze mid-step, her hands clamped around the flashlight. We listened, neither of us breathing. The shouting cut off all at once. Then we heard Mr. Larkin again, only softer, closer, like he was standing right outside our front door. "It is fine," he said, in that calm, fatherly voice I had heard 100 times when he was watering his lawn or unloading groceries. "Everything is fine. Come outside. You can stand in the dark with me." My sister clapped her hand over her mouth to keep from crying out. I grabbed her arm and pulled her closer to the circle of light. The knock came again, slow, steady, the same rhythm as before. My whole body tensed. I wanted to believe maybe he had survived, that maybe it was really him. But the alert's words echoed too loudly in my head. "They are not yours." The knock faded, replaced by the scrape of movement along the siding. Whatever it was dragged itself along the outside wall, circling the house. We followed the sound with our eyes as though we could see through the plaster. When it reached the back door, the handle rattled once, twice, then went still. The silence that followed was worse than the knocking. I thought about what I had seen through the curtain earlier, the way people's shadows twisted wrong, the way the street went empty after the lights flickered out. I thought about the scream I had heard, cut short like someone had clamped their hand over the mouth of the night. My stomach rolled, and I pressed my hand against it, trying to ground myself. The clock ticked louder on the wall, though I knew it was not actually louder. It was just that everything else was too quiet. My sister finally whispered, "Why are they doing this? Why now?" I did not know how to answer her. The truth was, I did not think there was a why. Shadows had always been part of us, just shapes following where the light allowed. But tonight, they were not ours. Tonight, they had peeled away, revealed as something separate, something waiting. It was not about now. It had always been there. That was worse to admit, so I shook my head and said, "We just have to hold out until morning." The lights flickered again, longer this time, and both of us screamed without meaning to. For one endless second, the room went black. In that second, I felt something brush the back of my neck, cold and thin, like fingers made of smoke. Then the bulbs blinked back to life, and the kitchen was flooded with brightness again. My sister was on the floor, the flashlight rolling away. I dove for it and snapped the beam toward her. Her shadow on the wall was crouched, its hands pressed against its face, even though she was not moving like that. "Stand up," I begged, my voice breaking. "Please, stand up." She forced herself up, trembling, and her shadow stretched back into line with her. She whispered. It touched me. I wanted to tell her it was her imagination, but my own skin still prickled where I had felt the cold fingers. Lying to her felt pointless. We gathered the flashlights and candles closer, making a tighter ring of light around the table. My sister pressed her knees to her chest and rocked slightly, whispering prayers under her breath. The alerts had not said anything about praying, but part of me wondered if it mattered. Did the shadows hear thoughts the way they copied movements? The idea made me sick, so I pushed it away. The minutes dragged into hours. Every time I looked at the phone, the time had only crept forward by a handful of numbers, never enough to feel like we were getting closer to sunrise. I could not remember what time the sun came up in winter. 6, maybe 7. The thought that we might have to endure this until then made my throat close. At some point, the screaming outside died away completely. The silence that followed was not comforting. It was hollow, expectant. I peered through the curtain again just for a second, though I knew it was a mistake. The street was empty. Not a single person stood outside anymore, but the shadows remained. They stretched long and dark across the pavement, twisting even though nothing cast them. Some bent around corners, some pulsed like they were breathing. One of them jerked its head in my direction, and I snapped the curtain shut so fast the rod clattered. My sister asked what I saw, and I told her nothing. She did not believe me. I could see it in the way her lips pressed tight, the way her eyes refused to leave the patch of wall where her shadow kept twitching. Around 2 a.m, the power dipped again. The refrigerator hummed down, then stuttered back on. The bulbs dimmed so low the kitchen plunged into half-darkness before flaring painfully bright. The shadows danced wildly in that instant, stretching, snapping back, like they were testing the edges of our protection. I thought about what would happen if the power went out completely. The candles would not last, the flashlights would fade, and then there would be nothing left to keep them from stepping free. My sister dozed for a few minutes at the table, her head against her arm, the flashlight beam wobbling as her grip loosened. I shook her awake gently, whispering that she could not let it go, not even for a second. She blinked at me, dazed, and whispered, "I dreamed I was in the street, but I was not me. I was the shadow." I had no words for that. I only pushed another candle closer to her and told her to focus on the flame. The silence stretched. My eyelids grew heavy, but I forced them open again and again. The red glow of the emergency alert still lit the phone screen on the table, reminding me this was real, reminding me that every instinct telling me to sleep was a trap. The clock ticked. The shadows leaned. The night held its breath. And in the middle of all of it, I began to wonder what would be left of us when the sun finally rose, if the sun rose at all. The candles had burned down to stubs by the time the clock on the wall crept toward 2:30. Wax hardened in strange little pools across the counter, and one of the flames guttered out completely, leaving behind a thin curl of smoke that made my sister gag. I lit another from the dwindling supply we had left, and placed it carefully in the circle, my hands trembling so badly I almost tipped the match into the wax. The kitchen was hot with the combined glow of all the lights, but the heat felt wrong, almost feverish. I wiped sweat from my forehead and told myself that meant we were safe, even though I knew deep down it only meant we were running out of ways to fight the dark. My sister had gone silent hours ago. She sat at the table with her knees pulled tight against her chest, her flashlight locked in her hands, her eyes so wide they reflected the candlelight like glass. Every now and then she whispered something I could not make out, maybe prayers or maybe just nonsense words to keep herself grounded. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her we would be okay, but the words would not come. Saying them out loud felt like tempting the shadows to prove me wrong. From outside came a sound I had started to dread, the hollow crack of another transformer popping somewhere down the line. The lights above us dimmed to half strength for a few long seconds, and the shadows in the corners bent like they were stretching awake. I swung both flashlights across the walls until the light steadied again, my chest burning from how hard I was breathing. My sister whimpered and ducked her head into her arms. I told her it was fine, but my voice shook too much to be convincing. The quiet that followed did not last. From the living room came a thump, soft but deliberate, like a footstep. I froze where I stood, the flashlight beams quivering across the wall. The sound came again, closer this time, dragging just slightly against the floor. My throat closed as I realized it was circling, moving toward us through the dark part of the house. I grabbed a lamp from the counter and carried it toward the doorway, my hands slick with sweat. The cord stretched just far enough to spill a pale glow into the hall, and for 1 second I saw it. A shadow stretched across the wall, too tall, too thin, its head bent at the wrong angle. There was no body attached, just the shape itself, moving independently. The moment the light touched it, the shadow jerked back, melting into the darker corners of the hallway. I yanked the lamp closer to me and stumbled back into the kitchen, my legs shaking so hard I could barely stand. My sister's voice cracked as she asked, "Did you see it?" I nodded because lying was useless now. Her grip tightened on the flashlight until I thought the plastic would snap. She whispered that it had looked like Dad, but taller, stretched, wrong. The word Dad made my stomach clench. I did not want to think about that. I did not want to imagine the shadows wearing the shapes of people we had lost. The clock ticked on the wall, too loud, each second scraping against my nerves. I tried to focus on keeping the light steady, but my mind kept circling the same thought. How long could we really last? Even if the sun came up, what if it was not enough? What if the shadows had already claimed too much of the world? The alert had not said this was temporary. It had not promised rescue. It had only told us to stay in the light. That was survival, not safety. Another thump came from the hall, louder this time, like something testing the edges of our light. My sister screamed and swung her flashlight beam toward the sound. For an instant, the light caught a shape leaning through the doorway, a figure cut from pure dark. Its head tilted slowly, almost curiously, and then it was gone, swallowed back into the hall. The kitchen fell silent again, but the silence felt alive, full of waiting. I wanted to run, to grab my sister and flee into the night, but the thought of stepping into the open made my stomach flip. Outside, the street had gone silent hours ago. No voices, no screams, only shadows that moved on their own. We would not make it 10 feet before the dark swallowed us. The kitchen, with its lamps and candles and buzzing overhead lights, was the only place left that felt even slightly ours. I sat across from my sister and set the flashlights on the table between us, the beams crisscrossing to cover as much wall as possible. My hands would not stop shaking. She whispered, "I cannot do this anymore," and for a moment I almost agreed with her. My body was so heavy with exhaustion that every blink felt like it might be my last. But then the memory of my shadow smiling at her came back sharp, and I forced myself upright again. "We just have to last a little longer," I said, though the words felt thin in my mouth. The candles flickered as if something had breathed across them. My sister yelped and pointed her flashlight at the nearest flame. The shadow on the wall behind it leaned forward, pressing close, its mouth stretching open in a silent scream. I lunged forward and shoved another lamp closer, and the shape snapped back flat, disappearing into nothing. My chest hurt from how hard I was breathing. My sister sobbed quietly, rocking in her chair. Minutes dragged on, each one heavier than the last. I started to feel like we were the last people alive in the neighborhood. The world outside had gone too still. No cars, no voices, no sounds of life. Only the faint hum of the electric lines and the tick of the clock. I tried not to think about the others, about whether they had already been pulled into their own houses by shadows that were not theirs. At 2:45 the power dipped again, longer this time. The lights dimmed until the kitchen was nothing but weak candle glow. My sister screamed as the shadows along the walls rose higher, pulling themselves up like they were climbing free. I grabbed both flashlights and swept the beams across the room, my arms aching from the effort. The shapes froze mid-step, their heads turning toward me with jerky movements, their mouths opening in those too wide smiles. I shouted wordless noise, anything to drive them back, and for a second it worked. The power surged, the lights flared, and the shadows slammed flat against the walls again. We collapsed at the table, gasping, tears streaking both our faces. My sister whispered, "It is never going to stop." I could not argue with her. Deep down, I knew she was right. This was not a storm that would pass. This was something bigger, something that had always been waiting for the chance to step free. The alerts had not been warnings. They had been confessions. I wiped my face with shaking hands and forced my voice steady enough to say, "We just have to make it through tonight." The lie tasted bitter, but it was all we had. The shadows pressed closer, testing the edges of the light, and I realized the truth I had been avoiding since the first alert. The shadows were patient. They did not need to rush. They had all the time in the world, and all they needed was for us to blink. By the time the clock edged past 3, my whole body felt like it was made of sandbags. Heavy, slow, dragged down by the need to close my eyes even for just a second. My sister had stopped pacing, and now sat slumped at the table, the flashlight still clutched in her hands but pointed at the floor. I kept nudging her awake whenever her head dipped too far, whispering her name sharply until her eyes snapped open again. We could not afford to slip, not even for a moment. The shadows were waiting for exactly that. The air in the kitchen felt stale and cold despite the lamps still blazing. Every candle flame trembled, tiny movements that made my chest seize up each time. The glow from the bulbs had grown weaker, I could tell, even though the power had not gone out again. They seemed to be fading slowly, like the shadows were drinking the light straight from the glass. I tapped the side of one lamp, and the bulb flickered faintly before settling back into its dim glow. It reminded me of a person on the edge of sleep, fighting to stay awake. The silence outside was unbearable. It was not the comforting kind of quiet you get late at night, when the neighborhood has gone still. This was heavy, intentional, the kind of quiet that pressed against the windows like a weight. I thought about all the voices we had heard earlier, the neighbors shouting, screaming, begging. Now it was gone, replaced by nothing but our own ragged breathing. I told myself that meant maybe they had survived. Maybe they had all barricaded themselves inside like we had. But deep down, I knew the truth. The shadows had taken them. The phone buzzed on the table, and I jumped so hard my chair scraped across the floor. My sister gasped and swung her flashlight beam toward me, her hands trembling so badly the light jittered across the ceiling. I grabbed the phone and looked at the screen. Another alert glowed in red, the same piercing tone, the same blunt words. Do not engage. Do not turn your back. They will take your place. My hands shook as I set the phone back down. My sister leaned closer, her face pale, and whispered, "What does it mean, take your place?" I could not answer. I thought about the grin I had seen stretched across my own shadow's face, about the way it had moved a beat behind me like it was practicing, rehearsing, waiting. The idea of it stepping forward when the light failed and sliding into my skin like it had always belonged made my stomach twist so badly I thought I would throw up. The overhead light flickered again, long enough for the shadows on the wall to ripple. My sister whimpered and pulled her chair closer to mine. Her hand brushed mine on the table, and I felt how cold her skin was. I squeezed it tightly, even though my own fingers were shaking just as badly. A noise came from the back door, soft at first, then louder. A scrape, then a knock. My sister flinched so hard her flashlight beam snapped across the window. "Do not answer it," I hissed, but she was already crying, her head shaking furiously. The knock came again, followed by a voice. It was our mom's voice, calm and familiar. "Sweetheart, it's me. Please open the door. I cannot find my key." My sister's face crumpled and she whispered, "It sounds like her. It sounds exactly like her." I tightened my grip on her hand until she winced. "She is asleep upstairs," I said firmly, though even as I said it, doubt twisted in my chest. What if it was her? What if she had come down and gotten locked out somehow? The voice called again, softer this time. "Please, let me in. It is cold out here." The way it said cold made every hair on my body stand on end. Too flat, too careful. My sister pressed her face against my shoulder, sobbing silently. The knock stopped, but the air in the room grew heavier, thicker. I forced myself not to look at the door, not to answer. The alert had said not to engage. That was all I had to hold on to. I turned both flashlights toward the back wall, and in their glow, I saw it. My shadow lifted its arm, slow and deliberate, even though I had not moved. My sister saw it too. She screamed, the sound tearing out of her, and the shadow froze, its head tilted at us. I shined both beams directly at it, and it snapped back into place, flat and still. My chest ached, my throat raw. My sister whispered over and over, "It is not you, it is not you," as if saying it would keep me anchored here. The candles burned lower, their wax puddling across the counter. The smell of smoke and hot wax filled the air, sharp in my nose. My sister coughed weakly, her eyes bloodshot from crying. I told her to drink some water, but when she lifted the glass, her shadow on the wall raised its hand before she did, smiling with her mouth stretched wide. The glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor, water spreading across the tiles. She gasped and scrambled back into her chair, shaking so hard I thought she might collapse. I swept the flashlight beams across the room again and again, whispering that we had to stay in the light, that it was the only way, but the truth was pressing against me harder with every passing second. The light was fading. No matter how many lamps we dragged into the kitchen, no matter how many candles we burned down to nothing, the shadows were patient. They knew we would run out. The phone buzzed again, another alert. I almost could not bring myself to look, but I forced my eyes to the screen. This one was shorter, sharper. Compromised individuals cannot be trusted. If their shadow moves without them, it is already too late. I felt ice flood my veins. I looked at my sister, and she looked back, both of us pale and shaking. Neither of us wanted to say it, but the thought was already there. Both of our shadows had moved on their own. Both had smiled. Both had twitched behind us like they were waiting for the chance to take that final step. My sister whispered, "What if we are already gone?" I could not answer. I just held the flashlight steady and prayed that the sun would rise before the shadows made their move. But as I stared at the wall, I noticed something that made my heart lurch. My shadow was not standing where it should have been. It had edged closer, just a fraction, almost unnoticeable, and its head was tilted toward me, its grin stretching wider, waiting. The final hour of the night felt like it stretched into an entire lifetime. Every tick of the clock above the kitchen doorway rang sharp in my skull, each second dragging heavier than the one before. My sister and I sat huddled together at the table, our hands clasped so tightly my knuckles had gone white. The lamps around us hummed, weaker now, their glow thinner, like the bulbs were losing their strength. The candles burned low, their flames dancing erratically, throwing strange shapes across the walls. It felt like the room was shrinking around us, the light bleeding away faster than we could replace it. The last alert still glowed faintly on the phone screen, its words echoing in my head. Compromised individuals cannot be trusted. If their shadow moves without them, it is already too late. I could not stop staring at it. The thought kept repeating until it felt carved into my bones. Both of our shadows had already moved. Both had smiled, lagged, twitched wrong. The alert's cold certainty whispered that it was already over, but I could not accept that, not yet. My sister kept glancing at me with wide, tear-streaked eyes, as if she was waiting for me to vanish or worse. I caught her staring once and asked softly, "Do you think it's me?" She shook her head too fast, whispering, "No, it's not you, it's not," but her voice cracked halfway through, and I knew the truth. We both doubted each other now. Maybe that was part of the design, the way the shadows worked their way in, planting fear until we could not even trust the people we loved. A deep creak rolled through the house then, the sound of wood bending under a weight. My sister stiffened. I swept the flashlights toward the doorway, my breath caught in my throat. For a moment nothing moved, then I saw it. A tall shadow stretched across the floor, reaching toward us, though nothing stood in the hall to cast it. The head was bent, the grin carved across its face too wide. My sister screamed and pressed herself against me, the flashlight shaking in her hands so hard the beam jittered. I forced myself to stand, though my legs felt like water. I pushed one of the lamps closer to the doorway. The glow spilled out into the hall and the shadow recoiled like smoke pulled back by a draft. For a brief second, I felt victorious, but then the overhead light flickered again, and the entire room dipped into dimness. All at once, every shadow on the wall lifted its head. They were not just ours anymore. Figures pressed against the walls, outlines of people who should not have been there, neighbors and strangers alike. Some too tall, some bent at odd angles, some with limbs stretched too long. Their faces were nothing but darkness, but the grins were there, jagged and wrong. My sister sobbed against my arm, whispering over and over that she wanted to go home, though we were already in our home. The phone buzzed again on the table. I snatched it up with shaking hands. The new alert was shorter, final. "If you see movement in your shadow, you are already compromised." That was it. No instructions, no hope. Just the end of the truth spelled out in red. I looked down at the floor, almost against my will, and felt my stomach lurch. My sister still clung to me, her flashlight beam wobbling. But where her body should have cast a shape, there was nothing. No shadow at all, just bare light on the tiles. My mouth went dry, and before I could stop myself, the words tumbled out. "Your shadow's gone." She froze, her breath catching in her throat. Then she looked at me with terror so sharp, it felt like being stabbed. "What about yours?" she whispered. I turned my head, slowly, dread crawling up my spine, and saw it. My shadow still stretched across the wall. But it was not still. It was standing straight, even though I was crouched. Its head tilted slowly toward me, the grin widening until it split too far. My body shook so hard I could barely breathe. I thought about the alerts, about the warnings that had felt so impossible when the night began. Avoid the shadows. They are not yours. Do not engage. Do not turn your back. They will take your place. Every line was true. Every line had been a step toward this moment. I knew then that we had been doomed since the first flicker of the lights. There was no escaping something that was part of you, no running from something that knew your every movement. But there was one thing left I could do, one final way to end it on my terms. I yanked the lamp cord from the wall. My sister screamed, begging me to stop, but I ignored her. One by one, I unplugged the lights, swept the candles from the counter, snuffed them out beneath my hand until the room plunged into darkness. The air went ice cold, and the whispers rose around us like a storm. For one last moment, I saw the truth. The shadows all stepped forward at once, peeling free from the walls like skin being shed. They filled the room, crowding closer, too many faces, too many grins, all reaching with hands that should not exist. My sister clutched me and sobbed into my chest, and I wrapped my arms around her, holding her as tightly as I could. The last thing I remember before the dark swallowed us completely was how quiet it became. No hum of electricity, no tick of the clock, no sound at all but the steady beat of my heart against hers. And then even that faded. When the sun rose hours later, the kitchen stood empty. The lamps were cold, the candles melted down to waxy stubs. On the wall above the table stretched two perfect shadows, side by side, holding hands. They never moved, never twitched, frozen in place, as if nothing had happened at all. The world outside woke to a new morning, but for us, the night never ended. The shadows had taken what they wanted, and in their own way, they gave us a kind of ending. Not in light, not in survival, but in the dark, where they had always been waiting. We had been talking about getting away for months. Work had been eating both of us alive, and his girlfriend had just finished a brutal semester at school, so the idea of a quiet weekend camping outside Asheville sounded perfect. Nothing fancy, just a couple of nights away from screens and noise. I borrowed an old tent from my cousin. My friend loaded his truck with firewood, and we were off. It felt like something normal, something harmless. The drive out was long enough that the city melted into rolling hills, and then into the thick wall of trees. North Carolina forests have this way of swallowing sound, and as soon as we parked at the trailhead, I noticed it. No car noise, no planes overhead, no far-off hum of life. Just the rustle of leaves and the occasional crow somewhere in the distance. I felt the first shiver of nerves, but brushed it off. I was not used to quiet like that. We hiked in maybe half a mile to a clearing by a stream. The ground was soft enough for tents, and there was already a rough fire ring of rocks left by whoever had camped before us. It was simple and private, the kind of place you imagine when you think of camping. We set up, made a fire, cracked a few beers, and it honestly felt great. The three of us sat there, trading stories, leaning back against logs, letting the flames do their thing. His girlfriend laughed so hard at one of his dumb impressions that she nearly spilled her drink, and I remember thinking this is exactly what I needed. The first night was easy. We cooked hot dogs on sticks, pretended not to burn marshmallows, and later took turns telling ghost stories. My friend went all out, doing voices and banging on the log beside him for dramatic effect. His girlfriend jumped so hard that she accidentally kicked dirt into the fire, which set off another round of laughter. It was the kind of night that makes you forget about alarms and deadlines and bills. We finally turned in sometime after midnight. The fire had died down to glowing red coals. The stars overhead were sharp, and the woods were just alive enough to be comforting. Crickets, wind, the occasional snap of a twig. I crawled into the tent, zipped myself into the sleeping bag, and listened as their voices faded into quiet breathing. That is when I noticed it. At first, it was nothing more than crunching leaves, like some animal moving nearby. I ignored it, thinking deer or raccoon, but it kept going, heavy, slow. 2 steps, pause, then another. It circled the camp. That was what made me sit up, heart pounding. An animal does not pace like that. I whispered my friend's name, but he was already awake. I could hear him shifting beside his girlfriend. He whispered back, "Do you hear that?" I nodded, though he could not see me in the dark. The sound circled closer, always stopping when one of us spoke. I reached for the flashlight I had left by the flap and clicked it on. The beam cut through the tent walls and we scrambled to unzip the door. I swung the light toward the sound, expecting to see a pair of glowing eyes, some animal startled by the sudden brightness. There was nothing, just trees, branches swaying in the slight breeze, the soft glitter of the stream reflecting light back at us. My friend held his breath. His girlfriend whispered, "There's nothing there." But the footsteps had been real. I know the sound of boots on dirt. I know the rhythm of 2 feet, not 4. We sat there for a long while, light sweeping over tree trunks, waiting for something to move. Eventually, the woods went quiet again, so still that I started doubting myself. Maybe we imagined it, spooked ourselves with all the ghost stories earlier. Maybe the sound carried weird in the trees. But even as I told myself that, I could not shake the feeling that something had been circling us, listening. We left the flashlight on a little while longer, beams bouncing between the 3 of us, before finally forcing ourselves to lie back down. My friend muttered something about deer again, trying to settle his girlfriend. I pretended to believe him. But when I closed my eyes, every creak of the trees sounded like someone shifting their weight, standing just out of sight. The next morning, the forest seemed harmless again. Sunlight cut through the canopy, the stream sparkled, and birds made the place feel alive. We brewed coffee on the little stove, laughed about how jumpy we had been, and promised not to scare each other with stories that night. His girlfriend admitted she barely slept, and I told her I was the same. My friend played it cool, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. We tried to shrug it off, chalking it up to imagination, but I noticed how often we glanced at the tree line as we went about the morning routine, packing food, fetching water, adjusting the fire pit. It was like none of us wanted to say it out loud, but the idea of something being out there stuck with us. The day itself passed normally. We hiked a little, gathered more wood, took naps in the Sunday. By evening, it felt safe again, and I caught myself wondering if I had exaggerated it in my own head. The woods play tricks, sound bounces. You expect to be creeped out at night, so maybe you make things worse than they are. Still, when the second night came, I found myself staying closer to the fire, reluctant to step away into the dark. My friend teased me for it, but he kept close too. His girlfriend wrapped herself in a blanket and sat with her back to the tent, watching the shadows stretch across the trees. None of us said it, but we were waiting for the sound again. And sure enough, as the fire sank into coals and the crickets sang, something in the dark moved, a snap of a branch, then the same steady pacing, only this time it was closer from the start. That night did not end like the first. That night, whatever was out there made sure we knew it was not an animal. The second night is when the tone of the trip shifted. We had convinced ourselves that the first night had been nothing. Nerves, shadows, stories mixing with the woods. By the time we had eaten dinner, I was almost sure I had imagined the footsteps. But then the sound returned, and this time it announced itself without hesitation. We had just climbed into the tent, the fire still glowing outside but burning low. My friend had started drifting off when it came. 3 sharp knocks, not far away, not distant or confused. They came from right next to us, on a tree that must have stood only a few feet from the tent wall. The sound was crisp, controlled, not the random knock of a branch or an animal brushing against bark. I sat up so fast that I hit my head on the top of the tent. His girlfriend grabbed his arm, eyes wide in the faint lantern light. He muttered a curse, unzipped the flap with more confidence than I knew he had, and shined his flashlight into the trees. His voice carried hard, louder than he probably meant. "Whoever the hell is out there, knock it off." The light cut through trunks, bushes, tall grass. Nothing. No person stepping into sight, no deer spooked by the sound, just silence. He kept the beam steady for a long time, jaw tight, but the woods offered nothing back. We finally zipped the flap and tried to settle. His girlfriend whispered that maybe someone was messing with us, maybe another camper who had seen our fire. But when I asked her where they were hiding, why they had not gone for our food, why the knocks came so deliberate, she went quiet. The hours dragged after that. I did not close my eyes once, my ears strained for every crackle or snap. At one point I thought I heard breathing, faint but real, like someone standing just outside the nylon wall. My chest tightened and I held still, not daring to wake the others. It faded, and I kept telling myself I was imagining it. Morning came with heavy relief. Sunlight spilling across the tent felt like an answer, like proof we had survived something. We crawled out one by one, stiff and quiet. My friend stretched and tried to play it off, but I noticed the dark rings under his eyes. His girlfriend stayed close to him, scanning the tree line like she was expecting someone to step out. That is when we saw the fire pit. The night before we had let it die on its own, the logs collapsing into ash. But in the morning, the rocks had been rearranged, not scattered, not kicked by an animal. They had been set into a perfect circle, smooth and precise. The ash had been brushed aside as if someone had taken time to make it neat. We all stared at it, waiting for one of us to suggest that maybe we had done it in some half-asleep state. But the truth was clear. None of us had done that. It was not food they wanted, not supplies. Whoever had come close during the night wanted to leave a message. I remember standing there with the cool morning air biting at my skin and realizing this was not just some prank. Someone had walked into our camp in the middle of the night and carefully changed the fire pit without taking a single thing. Our cooler was closed, our bags untouched. Even the folded blanket on the log where his girlfriend had been sitting was exactly as she had left it. The only thing that changed was the fire pit, and that meant whoever it was wanted us to notice. We ate breakfast in silence. The stream gurgled nearby, birds called, and it felt surreal that the world could sound so ordinary while my chest felt tight with unease. My friend muttered that we should pack up early, but his girlfriend insisted we stay. She said we were spooking ourselves, that it was just some hiker messing with us. Leaving now would make us look foolish, she said, like we had been scared away by shadows. I could tell my friend did not agree, but he let it drop. We tried to distract ourselves with another hike, walking along a ridge a mile away. The air was fresh. The view stretched out for miles, and for a while I thought maybe she was right. Maybe we were overthinking it. Then she froze. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Someone's there." We followed her gaze to the tree line across the ridge. At first I thought it was a trunk, but then it shifted. A tall, thin figure, standing still, watching. Too far to make out a face, too far to tell if it was even a man or a woman, but undeniably human in shape. We shouted. My friend cupped his hands around his mouth and demanded to know who it was. No answer. The figure just turned with slow precision and walked deeper into the trees, vanishing without hurry. The three of us stood frozen, our shouts echoing across the ridge. His girlfriend clutched his arm so tight that her knuckles turned white. I felt my skin prickle as if I had stepped into ice water. Whoever it was, they had no fear of us. They wanted us to see them. We hurried back to camp, packs swinging, eyes darting to every shadow. None of us said it out loud, but the fun of the trip was gone. The laughter of the first night had dried up. Now every sound of the forest felt charged. That night we packed up earlier than usual, shoving supplies back into bags with nervous hands. We tried to rest, but no one truly lay down. We sat in the tent listening, waiting, breath shallow. The footsteps came again. Slow, deliberate, circling, this time closer than before. Each crunch of leaves made my chest tighten. We did not unzip the flap. We did not shout. We just sat frozen, praying the sound would fade. But it did not fade. It paced for hours, back and forth, steady, patient, like it knew we were awake, like it was savoring how still we Saturday. The hours stretched until dawn. None of us slept. The ride home should have been the end of it. That was the thought that kept circling in my mind as we stuffed the tent and cooler back into the car. My friend slammed the trunk shut with more force than he needed to, muttering that he was done with the woods for a while. His girlfriend tried to act like she was fine, but she kept glancing back toward the trees as if expecting someone to step out and wave goodbye. We pulled out of the campsite in silence. The dirt road bumped beneath the tires, the trees finally thinning, and with every mile I told myself it was over. Maybe it had been a strange hiker. Maybe someone who lived nearby liked to mess with campers. Maybe it was nothing more than nerves feeding off each other. By the time we stopped for gas, I even managed to laugh about it. My friend laughed too, though it sounded more like relief than humor. That night, though, any sense of relief died quickly. I woke up at 3 a.m, the kind of waking that feels forced, like someone pulled you out of sleep. At first I did not understand why. My room was dark, my apartment silent. Then it came, 3 knocks, crisp and deliberate, against my bedroom window. The problem was that my bedroom is on the 2nd floor. There is no easy way to reach the window from outside. No tree limbs brushing against the glass. No ladder leaning nearby. Just 3 knocks, spaced with the same rhythm we had heard in the woods. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I sat up in bed, staring at the faint outline of the window, expecting another knock. None came. I did not move. I did not breathe. I waited until the first hint of daylight crept into the sky before I dared to get up. When I finally peered out, the street was empty, quiet, like nothing had happened. I almost convinced myself it was a dream, some leftover fear from the weekend. But the next morning my phone buzzed with a message from my friend. It said only one thing. "Did you hear knocking too?" My stomach dropped. I called him immediately. His voice was hoarse, tired. He told me he had woken up at the exact same time, 3 a.m, to the same 3 knocks at his window. He lived across town on the 3rd floor of his building. No one could have reached that window either. We tried to rationalize it. A coincidence, a dream. But 2 people having the same dream at the same time, and the same sound? Neither of us could explain it. The next day passed in a haze. I went through work distracted, my eyes drifting to the clock constantly. As night crept closer, I felt a tightness in my chest I could not shake. By the time I climbed into bed, exhaustion weighed me down, but I still could not rest. Every creak of the building made me flinch. That night there were no knocks. Instead, I woke to a new sound, breathing, heavy, slow, unmistakable. It was not mine. It was not the hum of the heater or the sound of a neighbor. It came from inside the room. I froze. The breathing seemed to come from near the foot of the bed, steady, patient, as though someone stood there watching. My hand inched toward my phone on the nightstand, the glow of the screen faint in the dark. When I flicked it on, the sound stopped. Just silence. My pulse thudded in my ears. I turned on the lamp, flooding the room with light. No one was there. The space was empty, but the air felt charged, heavy, as if something had only just slipped away. I sat up until dawn again, too afraid to close my eyes. The following morning, I noticed something new. Near the back door of my apartment, on the hardwood floor, a faint trail of muddy water, small puddles, as though someone had tracked it in from outside. The odd part was that the door was still locked, the chain still fastened from the inside. I had not gone out that night, and no one had come in, yet the trail led directly from the door to the window. My dog refused to go near it. She growled low in her throat, her fur standing straight, her body trembling. She would not cross the kitchen, not even for food. I texted my friend, and he sent back something that made my skin crawl. He said his girlfriend had seen someone standing outside their building the night before. A tall figure, unmoving, staring up at their windows. When she called to him to look, it was gone. We met the next evening, the three of us sitting in his living room, the lights on bright even though the sun was still up. We swapped everything that had happened since we left the woods. The knocks, the breathing, the puddles, the figure. As we spoke, a terrible realization took shape. It was not just happening to one of us. It was happening to all of us. His girlfriend pointed out the pattern. It came when we were alone. The knocks at night when we slept alone in our rooms. The figure appearing when she was alone at the window. My dog growling when I was the only one awake to hear it. It was like whatever had followed us wanted to separate us, to isolate us one by one. That thought chilled me more than anything. It meant it was deliberate. It meant there was intent behind it. We argued for hours about what to do. Should we call the police? But what would we even say? That footsteps and breathing had followed us from the forest into our apartments. Should we try staying together, never leaving one another alone? But we had jobs, obligations, families. We could not just hole up in one place forever. By the time I left, none of us had an answer. The only thing we agreed on was that we needed to be careful. We promised to check in constantly, to call if anything new happened. But beneath the promises, I could feel our fear growing, gnawing at us. That night, I tried to stay awake, watching TV with every light in the apartment turned on. My dog curled beside me, restless, ears twitching. Midnight passed, 1 in the morning, 2. At 3, the knocking came again. 3 deliberate knocks, this time on the front door. The sound echoed through the apartment, sharp against the quiet night. My dog leapt up, barking furiously at the door, but would not go closer than a few feet. My hands shook as I gripped the bat I kept by the couch. I stepped closer, straining to listen. The knocks did not repeat, but just as I lowered the bat, something else happened. From the other side of the door came the slow, unmistakable sound of breathing. I stood frozen at the door, my grip on the bat slick with sweat, my chest tight with dread. The sound of breathing on the other side was deliberate, heavy, and unhurried, as though whoever or whatever was there knew I was listening. I forced myself to move closer, my dog snarling low beside me but refusing to go any nearer. I pressed my eye to the peephole, bracing for a face to fill it. But there was nothing. Just the hallway stretching empty under the dim glow of the overhead light. The breathing continued, steady and too close, but the peephole showed me no one at all. I stepped back, my pulse hammering in my throat. I thought about calling the police, but what would I even say? That I heard breathing at my door with no one there? They would laugh, or worse, chalk it up to stress. I waited, the bat raised, until the breathing faded like mist dispersing. When it was gone, I realized I had not taken a full breath in what felt like forever. I did not sleep the rest of the night. At sunrise, I checked the door carefully. No mud, no footprints, no sign that anyone had been there. Just a faint condensation, like someone had leaned their face against the wood and exhaled. My stomach churned, and I scrubbed at it with shaking hands until the wood was raw. Later that morning, my phone buzzed with a message from my friend. It said simply, "We need to talk." I drove to his apartment immediately, bringing my dog with me because I could not leave her alone. When I arrived, his girlfriend was pacing the living room, pale and tired, and he was hunched over the coffee table with a piece of paper in front of him. He slid it toward me without a word. It was a photograph. At first I thought it was old, maybe one of those grainy prints from a disposable camera. Then I realized what I was looking at. It was the three of us at the campsite on the first night, sitting by the fire, beers in hand, smiling. But in the background, between the trees, there was something else. A figure, tall, thin, leaning slightly as though caught mid-step. Its face was indistinct, pale and blurred, but the shape of the head and shoulders was unmistakable. It had been there, watching us, and none of us had noticed. "Where did this come from?" I asked, my voice barely audible. His girlfriend swallowed hard. "It was on our doorstep this morning. No envelope, no note, just the photo." My skin crawled. Whoever or whatever had followed us was not just making noise in the night. It was watching, recording, and now it wanted us to know it. We argued about what to do. My friend wanted to go to the police now that we had something physical. His girlfriend insisted it would not help, that no one would believe a blurry figure in a photo. I stayed silent, staring at the image, trying to ignore the gnawing sense that the figure had not just been watching us, but had posed deliberately, knowing one day we would see it. In the end, we did not go to the police. Instead, we made a pact to stick together more often, to fight its attempt to isolate us. We planned to spend nights rotating between our apartments, always in pairs or all three together. We thought maybe if we showed it we would not separate, it might lose interest. That night, they came to my place. We ordered pizza, tried to watch movies, laughed a little too loudly to cover the tension. Every sound outside made us flinch, but nothing happened. By 2 a.m, exhaustion caught up, and my friend dozed off on the couch while his girlfriend took the spare room. I sat in the armchair, fighting sleep, determined not to let my guard down. Sometime around 3, the lamp beside me flickered. Just once, a quick dimming, then steady again. I told myself it was nothing, old wiring. But my dog lifted her head, ears perked, and growled toward the kitchen. I followed her gaze. At first I saw nothing. Then my stomach lurched. The back door was ajar, wide open to the dark. I knew with absolute certainty I had locked it earlier, checked it twice. I grabbed the bat and crept closer, my breath shallow. The night air seeped inside, cold and damp. My dog whimpered and pressed herself against my leg, refusing to go forward. I forced myself to step to the doorway and peek outside. The small patch of yard lay empty under the weak glow of the porch light, but on the wall beside the door, smeared across the paint, were 3 muddy handprints. Too large to be mine, too high to have been made by someone standing flat on the ground. I slammed the door shut and locked it, my hands trembling. My friend came running from the living room, his girlfriend from the spare room, both wide-eyed. I showed them the prints. None of us spoke for a long time. Finally, his girlfriend whispered, "It is not trying to get in, it is already here." Her words sank into me like ice water. She was right. The open door, the handprints, the breathing in my bedroom. It was not breaking in. It was moving through our spaces freely, showing us that locks and walls meant nothing. We did not sleep again that night. We sat together until dawn, the 3 of us silent, drained, every sound amplified by fear. When the sun rose, it felt like a small reprieve, but I knew daylight did not mean safety anymore. The following day, I could not focus at work. My boss asked if I was sick, and I lied, saying yes. All I wanted was to go home, but the thought of stepping into my apartment alone made me nauseous. I lingered in coffee shops, libraries, anywhere with people, until late evening. When I finally forced myself home, the first thing I noticed was the smell. Damp earth, thick and heavy, as though the forest itself had been dragged inside. It clung to the air, to my clothes, to my skin. I followed it to the kitchen. There, on the table, sat another photograph. My stomach knotted as I picked it up. This time, it was of me, sleeping in my own bed. The angle was from the corner of the room, near the closet. The caption scrawled in faint mud at the bottom read, "I like your new place better." I dropped the photo like it burned. My mind reeled with the impossibility. I lived alone. My door had been locked. yet something had stood in my room and watched me sleep. That night, when my friend and his girlfriend arrived after I called them in a panic, we sat together in the living room once again. None of us needed to say it out loud. Whatever had followed us from the woods had not just come back with us. It had made itself at home. The morning after finding that photograph, I sat on the couch with my head in my hands, the weight of sleepless nights and mounting dread pulling me under. My friend and his girlfriend tried to comfort me, but their faces told me they were just as shaken. None of us wanted to admit it out loud, but it was clear now. This thing was not content to just watch us. It was escalating. My dog barked suddenly, her fur bristling, and darted toward the hallway. We followed her and found muddy water seeping from beneath the bedroom door. I froze. The room had been clean the night before. My friend flung the door open, and we all stepped back. The carpet was soaked, puddles forming like the ground itself was leaking. The window was locked, yet condensation covered the glass as though someone had pressed their face against it. In the center of the room lay 3 small stones arranged in a perfect circle. His girlfriend bent down and touched one of them before I could stop her. She flinched and pulled her hand back. They are freezing, like they have been sitting in a river. I grabbed the stones with a towel and tossed them out the back door, but the unease lingered. We decided to leave the apartment for the day, thinking maybe the thing had less control over us outside. We packed a few essentials and went to a diner across town. At the booth, we sat close together, speaking in low voices. My friend suggested we stay in a hotel that night, somewhere with cameras and security. His girlfriend shook her head. It is not afraid of locks or walls. A hotel will not stop it. Again. What if it is a person? I asked, desperate to cling to something rational. What if it is just some psychopath who followed us from the woods? He could have keys. He could be getting inside while we are gone. His girlfriend looked at me with tired eyes. Do you really believe that? Because I saw its face last night. Or rather, the lack of it. Standing outside our apartment window, too tall to be anyone normal, too still. That is not a person. I wanted to argue, but deep down I knew she was right. The mud, the stones, the way doors opened without sound, the photographs left without being seen. It was not something that could be explained away. When we left the diner, we noticed a man sitting at the counter by himself. He was pale, gaunt, dressed in hiking clothes that looked too clean for someone who had actually been in the woods. As we walked past, he turned slightly, and my breath caught. He wore a faint smile, but his eyes seemed hollow, reflective, as if there was nothing behind them. My dog growled at him. We hurried out, my heart pounding. My friend glanced back through the window and whispered, "He is not eating. He is just sitting there, staring at us." We drove across town to his place, deciding to avoid my apartment altogether for the night. When we arrived, the first thing we noticed was the smell. Damp earth, thick and cloying, greeted us at the door. My friend cursed and shoved it open. Inside, muddy handprints decorated the walls, spiraling from the entryway up the staircase and into the bedrooms. They were higher than a person could have reached without standing on something, smeared in deliberate patterns. We followed them reluctantly and found his bedroom in disarray. Clothes were scattered, drawers pulled open, the sheets twisted on the bed. On the pillow sat a single folded photograph. My friend picked it up with shaking hands. It was of his girlfriend, taken as she brushed her hair in the bathroom mirror. The angle was from inside the shower. Her face in the reflection was calm, unaware. My stomach turned. She pressed her hands to her mouth and whispered, "I never saw anyone there. I would have noticed." That was the moment we realized there was no outrunning it. No matter where we went, it would already be waiting. The 3 of us tried to stay awake together again, but exhaustion eventually won. I must have dozed off on the couch because I woke to the sound of knocking. 3 sharp knocks, deliberate, against the front door. I sat up, my chest tight, listening. Another 3 knocks followed, louder this time. My dog barked furiously. I crept to the peephole, every muscle screaming for me to stop. The hallway outside was empty. Then, impossibly, the knocks came again, this time from the inside of the apartment, from the very door I was standing in front of. My blood ran cold. I stumbled back as my friend rushed in, holding a flashlight. He shined it along the door. No one was there. No footprints. Nothing. We sat in silence until dawn, each of us clutching something as a weapon. None of us spoke about what we had just experienced. The following day we met at the library, hoping to find answers. We pored over local legends, old news articles, anything about the woods outside Asheville where we had camped. What we found was scattered but chilling. There were old accounts of missing hikers, unexplained lights, and strange sounds. One story described a spirit that followed travelers home if they disrespected the forest. It did not steal food or supplies, only left signs to remind people it was near. 3 knocks, circles of stones, muddy handprints. Another account spoke of a figure that could not be seen directly, only in photographs or reflections, a presence that grew stronger the more attention it was given. We sat back from the books, our faces pale. His girlfriend whispered, "We brought it with us. We acknowledged it. That was enough." I wanted to deny it, to cling to some shred of rational thought, but the evidence was too overwhelming. The photographs, the knocks, the handprints, the smell. Whatever it was, it had chosen us. That night, we tried something new. Instead of splitting between our homes, we went to a relative's cabin 2 towns over. We thought maybe if we put distance between ourselves and the woods, it would lose its hold. We arrived before dark, locked the doors, and stayed together in the living room. For a few hours it was quiet. We almost allowed ourselves to believe it had stayed behind. Then, just after 3 in the morning, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I unlocked it, my hands trembling. It was another photograph. This time, it showed the 3 of us in the cabin, huddled together on the couch, staring at the very phone in my hand. The caption beneath it read, "You cannot run from me." I dropped the phone as though it had burned me. My friend picked it up and read it aloud. His girlfriend began to cry softly, the sound muffled by her hands. We realized then that it did not matter where we went or how far we traveled. It was not bound to the forest anymore. It was bound to us. The cabin felt smaller after that message, as if the walls themselves had shifted closer in the night. None of us spoke for a long time, each of us listening to the silence, waiting for the next sign. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. The photograph on my phone left no doubt. It was here with us, unseen but watching, waiting for us to notice it again. When dawn finally broke, we looked like shells of ourselves. My friend paced the room, clenching his fists, muttering that we could not live like this forever. His girlfriend sat in the corner, pale and silent, staring at the boarded windows as if she expected a face to press against the glass at any moment. My dog whimpered at my feet, restless, as though she felt it too. I tried to think of something practical, some step we had not taken. Running had failed, ignoring it had failed, researching it had only made its presence stronger. But I remembered something from one of the old accounts we had read at the library. The spirit, or whatever it was, thrived on fear and attention. It left signs so that people would acknowledge it. Every time we stared, listened, reacted, we were feeding it. I told them what I remembered, my voice trembling but firm. Maybe the only way to end this is to stop playing its game. Stop giving it what it wants. Stop seeing it. His girlfriend shook her head. How do you ignore something that sends you photographs in the middle of the night? How do you ignore handprints on the walls or knocking on the door? You do not let it control you, I said. We have been living in its shadow since that night in the woods. But maybe that is the point. If we stop letting it define our lives, if we refuse to acknowledge it, maybe it has nothing left to hold on to. It sounded fragile, almost foolish, but it was the only path that made sense. We had tried everything else, and each time, it pulled us deeper. My friend rubbed his face and finally nodded. Then we try it, together. No matter what it does, we do not answer. We do not look. We do not give it the satisfaction. That day we returned home. The drive was tense, every passing tree reminding us of where this began, but there was also a strange calm in choosing to fight back, even if that fight was silence. When we arrived, my apartment looked untouched, as if nothing had ever happened. No muddy prints, no stones, no water pooling beneath doors. It felt staged, like the calm before a storm. That night was the test. We stayed in my apartment, lights off, phones on, silent. At exactly 3 a.m, the knocking began. 3 deliberate raps on the window. We sat still. My dog growled low in her throat but did not bark, as if sensing our resolve. The knocks came again, louder this time, shaking the glass. Still, we did not move. Then came the breathing, heavy, ragged, right outside the window, as if someone pressed their face against the pane. My chest tightened, but I focused on keeping my eyes closed. Beside me, my friend squeezed his girlfriend's hand. The sound grew closer, louder, almost unbearable. Yet we did nothing. After what felt like an eternity, the noise stopped. The silence was deafening. We waited, not daring to speak. Minutes passed, and then hours. When the first light of dawn seeped into the room, we realized we had made it through the night without breaking. The following days were easier, though not without trials. Sometimes we would find a stone placed neatly on the porch. Sometimes we would hear knocks from another room. Once, I woke to see muddy handprints on the ceiling above my bed, but each time, we ignored them. We cleaned what needed cleaning, but we did not react. We did not speak of it. We gave it nothing. Slowly, the signs became less frequent. The knocks faded. The stones stopped appearing. The photographs no longer came. It was as if the thing had grown weaker, starved of our attention. Weeks turned into months. My friend and his girlfriend moved into a new apartment together, and for the first time in a long while, they laughed again. My dog stopped growling at corners and settled back into her old habits of curling up at my feet. I began to sleep through the night. Life, cautious but steady, returned. One afternoon, I drove back to Asheville alone. I parked near the trailhead, where it all began, and walked into the forest. The trees stood tall and silent, their leaves whispering in the breeze. I reached the old campsite, now overgrown with grass and vines, the fire pit scattered and cold. I stood there a long time, listening, waiting for footsteps, for knocking, for that heavy presence circling me. Nothing came, just the forest, alive and indifferent, moving to its own rhythm. I whispered into the air, more for myself than for anything that might be listening, "You do not own me anymore," and I turned and walked away. When I returned home, I checked my phone one last time, half expecting to see a message waiting, another photograph sent from the dark. But the screen was clear. No new messages, no unknown numbers, just silence. That night, I slept soundly, without interruption. No knocks, no breathing, no handprints. For the first time since that trip, I woke with sunlight streaming through the window and felt no weight pressing on my chest. We never spoke of it again, the three of us. We did not need to. The unspoken rule between us was simple. We would not give it life by remembering it, by telling the story over and over. Whatever it had been, it was gone now, starved by our refusal to acknowledge it. Sometimes, though, when I walk past a quiet stretch of forest or hear a branch snap in the night, I feel a twinge of unease. Not fear exactly, but respect. A reminder that there are things out there that thrive on the space we give them, on the cracks we leave open. But I also remind myself of what we learned. It cannot survive without your attention. You do not have to let it in. The sun was just starting to slide down behind the trees when I pulled into the gas station. One of those old, half-forgotten places off Route 19, with cracked pavement, a flickering sign that barely lit the overhang, and a store that looked like it hadn't changed since the late 80s. The kind of place that sells cold sandwiches wrapped in cellophane and coffee that tastes like it's been burned into the pot. I wasn't in a rush, just needed to top off the tank and grab something to keep me awake for the last leg of the drive. It was quiet, no other cars at the pumps, no music playing over the speakers, just the click of the pump handle and the low hum of bugs coming to life in the dusk. I was halfway through fueling when I saw her. She came around from the side of the building, slow and hesitant. A teenage girl, maybe 16, maybe a little younger. She looked wrong, not injured, not messy, just off. Her clothes were clean, but her hair was damp like she'd just washed it in a sink. Her arms were crossed tight over her stomach like she was trying to hold something in. She didn't look at me at first, just stood a few feet away, shoes half off her heels, toes pointed slightly inward like she was unsure she was even supposed to be here. Then she looked up. Her eyes were too wide, unblinking, like she hadn't slept in days. I didn't say anything, just paused with one hand still on the pump, waiting. She stepped closer, barely a whisper of sound from her feet on the concrete. Her voice, when it came, was too low for anyone else to hear. "Can you give me a ride?" It came out shaky, almost too soft to understand. She looked over her shoulder quickly, then leaned in slightly. "Please, don't tell them." My first instinct was confusion. Them. I opened my mouth to ask what she meant. Then the door to the gas station swung open. Two men stepped out, matching uniforms, dark blue with badges over the chest, private security maybe, or some kind of station-branded rent-a-cop setup. I don't know. They looked official enough at a glance, but their shirts were too clean, and their boots didn't have a speck of dust on them. The girl straightened immediately, took a step back, eyes down. She didn't run, didn't protest, just turned and walked slowly, calmly, back toward the store. The taller man gave a little wave, smile wide but empty, the kind you give a stranger you're trying to reassure. The other one nodded once, eyes skimming over me and landing on the pump. Then the girl. Then me again. I gave a nod back, reflex. They followed her inside without a word. I finished fueling and stood there for a long moment with my hand still on the pump, even after the nozzle clicked. It was probably nothing, some misunderstanding, a runaway with a guilty conscience, a kid trying to scare someone for fun. But I didn't believe that. Something in the way she moved, the way she folded into herself when they walked out, that kind of fear doesn't come from nowhere. Inside the store, the lights were too bright, cold humming fluorescents buzzing overhead. The girl was nowhere to be seen. One of the men stood behind the counter now, fiddling with something below the register. The other leaned casually against a rack of chips. I grabbed a bottle of water and a pack of gum without really thinking about it, and when I walked up to pay, the man behind the counter smiled. Said something about the heat. His badge said, Hollis. The other guy was Ray. I nodded, said something generic about long drives, and tapped my card. The machine was slow. I glanced around, hoping to catch a glimpse of the girl. There was a back hallway behind the drink coolers, with a restroom sign above it. The door was closed. Ray followed my gaze. "Bathroom's out of order," he said. I nodded again. Hollis handed me my receipt and wished me a good night. I walked back to my car with that crawling sensation in my shoulders, the kind you get when you realize you're being watched just a little too closely, but can't prove it. Once I was back on the road, the silence felt heavier, like it had settled into the car with me. I drove for another hour before pulling off at a motel. I couldn't shake the feeling, even after a shower, even after flipping through late-night channels just to fill the room with sound. I remembered I had the dash cam running. I almost didn't check it, felt pointless. But curiosity is a strange thing. It nudges you, even when you're sure nothing new will come of it. I loaded the footage on my laptop and scrubbed through. There she was, walking up slowly, clothes clinging slightly to her frame like they hadn't dried all the way. I turned up the volume. "Can you give me a ride?" A little louder than I remembered, her voice shook at the edges. "Please, don't tell them." Then the part I hadn't heard. As she stepped back and the men came into frame, she said it fast, barely audible over the hum of the pump and the wind in the mic. "They're not really cops. Don't believe them." Then nothing, just her turning and walking away, just their smiles. I played it again, and again, and again. Each time her voice sounded a little clearer, not in volume, just in conviction. "Not really cops. Don't believe them." She said it with the kind of certainty people don't fake. I sat there for a long time, laptop open, room silent except for the buzz of the fridge. It didn't feel like a prank. Didn't feel like a kid acting out. It felt like something else. Something I'd stumbled into by accident halfway through a road trip, and I wasn't sure if I was meant to leave it behind. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said. I didn't sleep much, maybe a few hours, restless and shallow, waking at every noise in the motel hallway. I'd hear footsteps or a door shutting somewhere, and half expect to look up and see one of those men from the gas station standing outside my window. It was stupid, irrational, but I couldn't shake it. I got back in the car around 8, drove for an hour with the radio off. Every time I glanced in the rearview mirror, I thought I saw a white SUV a few cars back, keeping pace with me. Probably nothing. 100 people drive white SUVs, but I kept checking. At a rest stop just past the county line, I pulled into a corner spot and watched traffic come and go. It was quiet, mostly truckers and older couples. I parked, leaned back in the seat, and went through the dashcam footage again. The same moment played back, over and over her voice, soft and urgent, asking for help, saying those men weren't really who they claimed to be, saying not to believe them. I listened carefully, trying to pick apart every word, every sound in the background. I slowed it down, adjusted the levels. Nothing else jumped out, just her words and the mechanical whir of the pump behind us. But something about the way she said it, the quick glance over her shoulder, the way she dropped her voice just before they appeared, it felt practiced. Not rehearsed, but like she'd done it before. Tried it before. Maybe with someone else. That idea stuck with me. Because if she'd asked before and she was still there, then it meant no one had helped. Or worse, someone had tried, and that's why she was still there. I opened my laptop and pulled up a search engine, typing in the name of the gas station printed on the receipt from the night before. Hollow Pines Fuel Go, just outside a place called Baxter. Nothing unusual on the first page. Address, phone number, one blurry street view photo from 5 years ago. A couple of reviews, mostly bad coffee complaints and price gripes. One mentioned weird hours. Another said the bathrooms were always locked. I searched the name of the town. Baxter, Georgia. Population under 2,000. A handful of local businesses. No official website. No local newspaper. It was the kind of place that sits just off the edge of a real map, technically there, but only barely. I dug a little deeper, searched for missing persons near the area. A few names came up, scattered over the last 10 years. One stood out, a girl named Mallory Denton, reported missing 4 years ago, 16 years old at the time. Last seen outside a small gas station off Route 19. There was a photo. I stared at it longer than I meant to. It wasn't conclusive, most grainy school photos aren't, but the eyes caught me. Same wide, haunted look. Same dark hair pulled back too tight. I couldn't be sure, but I couldn't ignore it either. A bad idea started forming in my head, the kind that scratches at the inside of your skull until you either do something about it or go a little crazy trying not to. I needed to go back. Not to confront anyone, not yet, just to see, to confirm something for myself. I told myself I'd only drive by. Just pass through, no stopping. A loop around the station, a glance at the door, and I'd be gone. Back on the road, back to real life. It was early afternoon when I got close. The road dipped and curved through a dense patch of trees, then opened up suddenly. There it was, the same crooked sign, the same sun-faded banner advertising a soda deal that had probably expired 2 years ago. One car at the pump this time, a blue pickup, old and rusted. No sign of the men, no sign of the girl. I drove past slowly, pretending to check directions on my phone. My eyes scanned the lot. The front door of the store was closed. One of the windows had a handwritten sign taped to it. Restroom out of order. I kept going. A half-mile down, I turned off onto a side road that curved behind the woods, pulled off into the gravel shoulder and sat there for a while. I wasn't sure what I was doing, trying to reason with myself, trying to build a case for why this wasn't my problem. She didn't even ask again, I thought. She walked away. She followed them. She chose to go back inside. But I didn't believe that. No one asks for help like that unless they've tried everything else. I waited another 30 minutes, then turned back. drove around the opposite side of the block and parked where I could see the rear of the station through a break in the trees. It was almost silent out here, the occasional drone of insects, distant traffic, a dog barking far off, no movement around the store, no rear entrance. Just a loading door that looked sealed shut with rust. I started the car again, rolled back toward the main road, and passed by once more. This time, I noticed something in the window. A board with paper slips pinned to it, flyers, maybe ads, maybe something else. I couldn't be sure, but one of them looked like a missing poster. I slowed, just for a second, just enough to glance. The image was too small to make out from the road. But the paper looked aged, not new. Not something a place like this would normally bother keeping up. I didn't stop. I kept driving. An hour later, I checked the footage again. Played the girl's voice in my head until I could hear it without the audio. They're not really cops. Don't believe them. I tried to tell myself I'd done enough, that I'd looked, that I'd confirmed it was strange, yes, but not illegal, not something I could act on without more than a whisper and a bad feeling. But it didn't stick, because I knew I was already in it now, just by hearing her, just by not turning away. I got back to the gas station the next morning a little after 9. The place looked the same as always, same tired sign, same peeling paint, same flicker in the open light above the door. There was a different car at the pump this time, but otherwise, it could have been any morning in the past 20 years. I didn't go inside right away. I sat in the car and watched. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels intentional, like the world is holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I saw movement in the back window of the store, a quick shape. It could have been anyone, Hollis, Ray, the girl. I got out and walked to the side of the building, acting like I was just stretching my legs. There was a narrow alley between the store and the neighboring lot. I followed it. Trash bins lined one side, stacked pallets on the other, a back door locked and a small barred window too high to see through. A soft noise caught my attention, metal scraping lightly against metal. I paused, held my breath, nothing else. Just the hum of the ice machine around the corner and the slow creak of a plastic sign in the wind. I knocked once on the back door, not loud, just enough. Nothing. No footsteps, no reaction. Back in the car, I told myself this was a waste of time, that I had no plan, no reason to be here. But I couldn't drive away, not yet. So I waited. At 10:30, Hollis came out to sweep the front walkway. He didn't notice me until I stepped out of the car. "Back again," he said without much enthusiasm. I gave a half smile, still on the road. He leaned on the broom. "You get lost or something?" "Just thinking about that girl." He didn't answer right away, just looked at me for a long second before saying, "You're not the first person she's talked to." "Others stopped to help. Some tried, most just drove off. She's got this way of pulling people in, makes you think something's wrong." "Isn't there?" Hollis shrugged. "Depends who you ask." "She's still around?" "Not right now. Her uncle picked her up." She told me you weren't real cops. That made him laugh again. Same tight, dismissive bark as before. She doesn't know what she's saying. What about Ray? He work here today. Day off. I let the silence stretch between us. His hand tightened on the broom handle just a little. She say anything else to you? He asked. I shook my head. Not really. Best to let it go, he said. She likes attention, that's all. I nodded like I understood. Then I bought a soda I didn't want, used the receipt to prove I'd been there, and left. Out on the road again, I checked the rear view more than usual. No white SUV, no blue pickup. But the feeling was still there, like I wasn't alone. Like something had been set in motion, and even though I couldn't see it, it was starting to catch up. I went back to the library. The same woman was behind the desk, wearing the same sweater and the same reading glasses. She looked up with a smile that faltered when she saw me. "You're back," she said, not quite a question. "I have a few more things I'm hoping to check." She led me back to the archive room again without asking for details. This time, I searched everything I could on Hollow Pines Fuel Go. Not much came up. A few mentions in the local business section. One article about a failed permit inspection from years ago. Another about a robbery, but it was brief and vague, no suspects named. Then I searched Ray and Hollis. I didn't know their last names, but I tried every combination I could think of: Hollis Security, Ray Baxter, Hollow Pines uniform staff. Still nothing. I tried Mallory Denton again, but there were no updates. No new sightings, no additional photos. Just that one grainy image and the same dry sentence. Last seen outside Hollow Pines Fuel Go. Back at the front desk, I asked the librarian if she knew the Denton family. Her mouth tightened. They moved a few years ago. "Do you know where?" "No, sorry," but her voice didn't sound sorry. "Did she go to school here?" She nodded. Baxter High, quiet girl, smart. "Was it a big deal when she went missing?" She glanced toward the back room, as if to make sure no one else was listening. "It was at first, but around here, things fade fast. People move on." "Just like that?" Her eyes softened. "There are some things folks don't want to talk about." That night, I checked into a different motel, farther from town. I pulled the car around back, parked under a burned-out light, and backed up the dashcam files to my laptop. Then I did something I hadn't planned on. I emailed the audio clip, the part where Mallory speaks to a contact I hadn't spoken to in years, a friend from college who worked freelance cybersecurity now. She owed me a favor. I just wrote, "Need help identifying voices in this audio, especially the girl. Not urgent, but soon." I didn't tell her what it was or where it came from. Didn't say I'd heard the girl speak myself. Didn't say I thought she might still be alive. The next morning, I woke up to her reply. All it said was, "This is recent, because if so, you might be right." And below that, a name. Mallory Denton, Baxter, GA, still listed as missing, still flagged active, That voice is a match. The message stayed on my screen for a long time before I could bring myself to read it again. I don't know what I expected her to say, maybe something vague, inconclusive, but not confirmation. Not that. Not someone else verifying the voice, confirming what I already knew deep down. The girl was Mallory Denton, still missing, still listed as active. And I'd seen her, heard her, less than 48 hours ago. I stared at the blinking cursor beneath her email. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't know what to write back. What was I supposed to say? That I'd found her but done nothing. That I was sitting in a cheap motel with a growing stack of unease and no plan. Instead of replying, I closed the laptop and stared at the ceiling for a while. I was in it now, whether I wanted to be or not. That afternoon, I drove back toward Baxter, but I didn't go to the gas station. I parked near the diner a few blocks away. It looked abandoned from the outside, but a neon open sign buzzed faintly in the window. Inside, 2 people sat in a booth drinking coffee. One older man, one woman with a tired ponytail, and an even more tired smile. They both looked up when I walked in. The place smelled like burnt toast and old grease. I ordered a cup of coffee and sat at the counter, keeping my back to the door. The waitress came over. Her name Tag, said Cheryl. You're not from around here, she said. I gave a half shrug, just passing through. You've passed through a couple times now. I didn't reply right away. After a moment I asked, that girl on the flyer at the gas station, Mallory, you know anything about her? Cheryl went still, just slightly. Her hand hovered over the sugar jar. Why are you asking? She talked to me a couple nights ago. That got the attention of the guy in the booth. He didn't turn around, but I saw his posture shift. She asked for help, I said not to believe the guys at the station. Cheryl glanced toward the window. You should be careful what you repeat around here. I'm not looking for trouble. Trouble doesn't care what you're looking for. I sipped the coffee. It tasted like burnt paper. She alive? I asked. Cheryl didn't answer for a long time. Finally, she said, she used to come in here, long time ago. Quiet girl, didn't talk much, but she always left a tip. One day she stopped showing up. Then the flyers went up. You believe she's still around? I believe there are things people don't like talking about. People like Hollis and Ray. She flinched a little at the names. I don't know what goes on over there, she said. I don't want to know. The man in the booth stood up then, dropped a couple of bills on the table, and walked out without saying a word. I left a tip for the coffee and followed soon after. In the parking lot, I checked around the corner before heading back to my car. Nothing, no movement, just a crow on a telephone wire watching like it knew more than I did. That evening, I parked farther from town, just off an old dirt road. I sat in the car for an hour, windows cracked, engine off. I kept thinking about the girl's voice. They're not really cops. Don't believe them. That line looped in my head over and over like a stuck record. And then I did something I didn't plan. I pulled out my laptop and made a copy of the dashcam footage onto a fresh USB stick. Then I made 2 more. One went into the glove box, one into my coat pocket. The third I tucked into the motel Bible in the nightstand drawer. Insurance. Just in case. The next morning, I parked behind the hardware store next to the gas station. There was a narrow alley that ran between the buildings. I waited until a delivery truck pulled in and blocked the view from the street, then walked toward the back door of the station. Same locked door, same stacked pallets. But this time, I noticed something I hadn't before. Scratches on the wall, faint, like someone had run their nails down it in frustration or fear. I knocked once. Nothing. I tried again, harder. Still nothing. Then a voice soft, right behind the door. "Who is it?" It was her, Mallory. I kept my voice low. "I saw you 2 nights ago. You asked me for help." Silence. "I believe you," I said. "I don't know what's going on, but I want to help." Another long pause. "They don't let me leave," she said. "Not really. They say I can, but I know they're lying." "Who are they?" "They're not cops. They wear the uniforms, but they're not real. I don't know who they are. I think they used to work here, but now it's different." I glanced toward the alley entrance. Still clear. "Why are you here? Why stay?" "They watch everything. If I run, they say they'll tell people I made it up, that I'm just a runaway, that I stole from them. I don't even know if they can be caught." "I have proof," I told her. "Footage, audio. I can give it to someone." Another pause, then quieter. "I've tried that before." "You're not alone anymore." Footsteps. Fast, from inside. "Go," she whispered. "They're coming." I turned and slipped back around the building, heart hammering. Back in the car, I drove without thinking, zigzagging through side streets until I was back near the motel. I didn't go in, just sat in the lot and let the weight of what just happened sink in. Mallory was still there, still trapped, still scared. And I was the first person who had proof she ever reached out. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face behind that door. Mallory. Her voice was still in my ears, soft but scared. She was real. She was there. And I knew, with a kind of cold certainty, that if I didn't do something soon, she wouldn't be for much longer. I stared at the ceiling until the light outside turned from orange to blue. Then I made coffee in the motel room, the kind that comes in a pouch and tastes like burnt plastic, and sat with my laptop open in front of me. I played the dashcam clip again, watched the moment where she stepped into frame, leaned toward the car, and whispered what I now knew was more than just fear, it was truth. "They're not really cops. Don't believe them." I tried to think logically. Mallory was missing, still officially flagged as such. The men at the station were posing as law enforcement, maybe ex-security. There was video. There was audio. I had her voice, and now I had a second encounter, recorded my conversation with her through the door, captured with a discreet voice memo app running in my pocket. I had proof. What I didn't have was trust in the system that should be handling this. If I went to the local sheriff's office, who would they believe? A stranger with shaky recordings and a gut feeling. Or the two locals who'd been running that station for who knows how long, men with matching uniforms and blank smiles. I pulled out my phone and stared at the contact list. There was one name I hadn't thought about in years, a guy I used to know from college, Chris Summers. He'd done a short stint in private investigations before moving into journalism. We weren't close anymore, but I remembered enough to know he didn't like letting things go when they smelled wrong. I hit call. It rang longer than it should have. Just when I thought it would go to voicemail, he picked up. "Yeah?" "It's me," I said. "Listen, I need a favor." "What kind of favor?" "The kind where someone might be pretending to be dead, or disappeared, or both, and there's a gas station involved." He didn't answer for a second. "Where are you?" "Georgia, near a place called Baxter." He sighed. "Of course you are. All right, start from the top." I gave him the summary: Mallory, the audio, the uniforms, the locked door. I tried to keep it short, but once I started I couldn't stop. Chris didn't interrupt. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "That's a lot," he said. "I know." "You still have the footage?" "I've got multiple copies." "Good. Don't trust the cloud. Don't trust email. Print it if you can. Thumb drives. Mail one to yourself." I already did. Another pause. "I'll be there in 12 hours. "You're coming here?" "Hell yes, I'm coming there. If this is real, it's big. But you can't do anything until I get there. Don't confront them. Don't go back to the station. Don't try to talk to the girl again. I don't think she can wait much longer." "And I get that," he said, voice tight. "But if you disappear next, then no one can help her. Don't be a hero. Be a witness." I hung up and sat there for a while, feeling like the ground had started to shift under me. I spent the next hour driving back roads, just to see if anyone was following me. I didn't see any signs, but that didn't settle me. It just made the silence heavier. Around noon, I parked across from the station again. This time I stayed in the car, watching from a distance. Hollis was outside, pretending to wipe the pumps down with a rag that was already dirty. Ray came out a few minutes later, carrying a box of snacks from the back. No sign of Mallory. No sign of anything out of place, at least. Not if you didn't know where to look. They talked like everything was normal, smiled at customers, sold coffee and gum. On the surface, it was just another roadside pit stop. But I saw the way they kept glancing toward the back of the building. At one point, a delivery driver pulled in. They met him outside. No one else went in or out during the drop. When the driver left, they locked the store door behind him, just for a moment. I watched Ray slip a key back into his pocket as they reopened. Control. They had complete control. That night, I printed copies of the missing flyer with Mallory's face and the date she was last seen. I pinned one to the bulletin board at the diner, the library, and on the inside of the motel lobby door. It was probably stupid, but I wanted her to see it, to know someone still cared. I didn't sleep that night either. At 2 a.m., I heard a car slow down outside my room. I didn't move. Lights passed across the ceiling, then silence. The car drove on. But the chill in the air didn't leave. Around 5, I packed everything I had into one small duffel and checked out of the motel. I drove to a different one, a few towns over, and waited in the lobby until I could check in. Used a different card this time, different name, just in case. Chris arrived just after lunch. He looked older than I remembered, hair a little thinner, shoulders a little heavier, but the moment he saw me, he was locked in. "You weren't kidding," he said. "I never do." We spent the next 3 hours going through everything: footage, audio, the photos I'd taken of the station, the notes I'd written after each visit, the flyers. Chris took it all in. At one point, he leaned back in his chair and muttered, "This is organized." "You think it's just them?" "No," he said. "I think it starts with them. But if this girl's been missing for years and no one's come looking, that means someone higher up is keeping it that way. So what do we do?" He looked me in the eye. "We hit it. One shot. We go back. We get her. And we bring it straight to someone who can't ignore it." "You mean the cops?" "I mean the press." We went back the next day just after 3 in the afternoon. Chris wanted daylight. Said it was better for optics if we ended up needing to talk to someone official. Cameras don't lie, but people do, and people always feel bolder when it's dark. Daylight made it harder to pretend nothing was happening. He had gear better than mine. 2 body cams, small enough to clip behind a shirt button, 1 backup recorder on his belt, a second phone running a live feed to a locked folder. He worked methodically, like he'd done this before. He probably had. We didn't say much on the drive over, just ran over the plan again. I'd go around the back like before, knock once. Chris would hang back, watch from the lot, and follow if anything changed. It was hot again, sun beating down on the metal roof of the car, making everything feel slower, heavier. Hollis was behind the counter when we walked in. He looked up, and his smile didn't even flicker. "You boys need something?" Chris was already recording. I picked up a soda from the fridge, just like last time. "We're looking for someone," I said. "Mallory Denton." The smile dropped. "Don't know her." "She was here. We both saw her. She asked for help." "You've got the wrong place." Chris stepped forward. "You know she's listed as missing, right? Active case. You've got her flyer pinned up by the door." "That's old," Hollis said. "No one took it down." "Convenient." Hollis stepped around the counter slowly. "You want to leave now?" Chris didn't move. "No." That's when the back door opened. Ray stepped in, still wearing the same dark blue shirt, but now his sleeves were rolled up. He looked tired, or maybe just annoyed. "I'd go," he said. "We want to talk to the girl," I said. "There's no girl here." Chris reached into his pocket and pulled out the USB. "This has your faces, her voice, you telling people not to worry. You've been holding her here." Ray shook his head slowly. You don't know what you're doing. Maybe not, Chris said, but someone will. They both looked at each other, just a flicker of communication, a second of decision-making. And then something changed. Ray stepped aside. She's out back, he said. Go get her. I didn't wait. I pushed past him and through the door into the back hallway. It was narrow and dim, just a cracked floor and a faint smell of mildew. Mallory was there, sitting on a bench by the storage room. She looked up when I came in. Her eyes were the same wide, cautious, but something had shifted. She didn't look afraid. She looked ready. They said you came back, she said. I nodded. We're getting you out of here. Chris came in behind me. He didn't say anything, just handed her a hoodie and a pair of sunglasses from his bag. She put them on without question. Out front, Hollis didn't stop us. Neither did Ray. We walked out the door like we were picking someone up from a shift. Once we were in the car and halfway down the road, Mallory finally spoke again. They didn't hurt me, she said. But they didn't let me go either. Not really. You don't have to explain, I said. I stayed because they told me no one was looking, that I was better off just staying quiet. Chris glanced back at her. You're not invisible, not anymore. She didn't cry. She didn't thank us. She just looked out the window and didn't speak for the next hour. Chris made some calls, not the police, not yet. He had a contact at a national outlet, someone who specialized in missing persons, especially ones with holes in the official story. By the time we reached the next town, the audio files, dashcam footage, and body cam video were already backed up in 3 places and sitting in the inbox of someone who had the power to put it all in front of the right eyes. We booked 2 rooms, one for Chris and me, one for Mallory. She kept the door cracked between them and left the TV on all night. Not for noise, just the light. The next morning, Chris's contact called, said they were putting a story together, wanted to talk to Mallory. He told them not yet, that she needed space. We spent 2 days in that motel, ate takeout, watched bad cable, sat in silence a lot. She told us pieces, slowly. She'd run away once, years ago, after a fight at home. Ended up at the gas station by chance. Ray was working there then. Said he knew someone who could help. Took her in, said he'd drive her to a shelter. Instead, he kept her in the back room for a night, then another. Said it was safer that way. Said he was protecting her. Said if she left, the cops would think she was a thief. It never got violent. That's what she repeated, like she wanted it to matter. But it was still a cage, just without bars. After a while, she stopped asking. A few people saw her over the years, she said. Truckers, travelers, a couple who passed through. She asked for help, but each time they'd smile and step in before she could say too much. Say she was confused. Say she was their niece, their worker, their problem. She started to believe it. Until I stopped. And listened. 3 days later, we drove her to a safe house Chris knew. Somewhere out of state. Somewhere quiet. We didn't ask for details. Didn't press. Before we dropped her off, she turned to me and said, "I didn't think anyone would come back." "I didn't think I would either," I said. She nodded, got out, walked up the front steps without looking back. Chris and I drove home in silence. The story ran the following week. Mallory's photo was everywhere. The audio, the footage, the flyer, everything. A public record, finally. The gas station shut down. Hollis and Ray disappeared before anyone could serve them. An investigation opened, but I don't know how far it went. Some things slipped through the cracks, but her name won't anymore. Every now and then, I check the online updates. Mallory hasn't resurfaced. She has a new name now, I think. A new life. The footage still lives on my laptop. I don't watch it anymore. Not because I'm trying to forget. Because I don't need to. It happened. She asked for help. And someone listened. This time, that was enough.